StarCraft, the Terran Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26, The Bennett Family. Li Pachiliang. He used to work for Wolf Industries. After the war, the economy was in a depression and the company laid off employees, so he joined the army. Li is a very serious person who never slacks off in anything he does. Well, if you meet him, you will definitely remember his pair of deep black eyes like the deep sky. Rick stared at Augustus. At a certain moment, he felt that Augustus seemed to be the elder brother of these people, and he knew his subordinates like brothers who grew up together. Augustus would be annoyed by their bad habits and proud of their strengths, and that photo was a family portrait. In the boot camp, few people in the same class were willing to talk to Rick because he didn't like to communicate with others and was not humorous enough. Most importantly, when he smiled, he always made people feel fake. Although Rick corrected his smile in front of the mirror countless times in the boot camp to make it more natural, it did not make him more popular. Rick was once a member of the Tarsinus creation family. He grew up in a materially rich, but extremely closed environment. In the city of Tarsinus, where there are still huge slums, Rick's life is simply heaven in the eyes of the lower class who can't even survive. But in Rick's heart, everything has its price. From childhood to adulthood, Rick has never walked out of the Bennett Sky Tower, a few hundred stories high, owned by his family in the center of Tarsinus. The people Rick has seen the most are his nanny, housekeeper and maid. From economics, politics, art, management, history, aristocratic etiquette, there is a whole team of private teachers responsible for his education. In addition, Rick also has to learn aerospace, starship manufacturing, interstellar port management and other knowledge closely related to his family's industry. When Rick was 5 years old, his father gave him a homework, which cost items in the interstellar barge transportation network should be cut to provide profits, and Rick's answer was people. Parents never let anyone other than family members and servants have close contact with their son. This is certainly to expose their children to the public as little as possible, and reduce the risk of them being kidnapped. However, Rick knew that they just wanted to ensure that this son who had excellent genes from both families could become the heir they wanted without any interference from the outside world. Rick didn't like politics. He was well aware of the intrigues between the creation families. All the creation families were both friends and enemies. They would form alliances for interests and power, and would also fight for greater power and interests. The leaders of the creation families were the monarchs of commercial empires, and their families were the royal courts of these empires. As the center of the economy and politics of the Terran Federation, Tarsinus has absorbed nutrients from other planets for its own growth through commodity dumping, land annexation, economic sanctions and other means in recent decades. The Terran Federation is like a pressure cooker placed on a raging fire. Hundreds of planets such as Korhal IV and Futuristic II were thrown into the pot and cooked until the flesh and bones were separated, until all the nutrients and nutrition were precipitated, leaving behind a pile of white bones. This life like a prince in the palace made Rick feel truly empty. For 18 years, his life had always remained the same, with no difference from day to day. Every day he looked down at the prosperous Tarsinus from the top floor of the Bennett Sky Tower, watching hundreds of skyscrapers and sky towers cut the deep blue sky of Tarsinus into jagged shapes. But just like all cities in the Terran Federation, behind the magnificent skyscrapers are miles of slums. Under the glorious and beautiful buildings is grey, where there are rivers formed by industrial wastewater, piles of discarded parts, and garbage discarded by the upper class. People who can't see the sun live in shacks, built of old metal. This most miserable hell on earth in the Terran Federation walks on the edge of law and morality. Rick knows that slums are where the poor live, and how painful their lives will be, but those are so unreal to him. Just like the prosperous Tarsinus outside the window, he can't touch it. If Rick was the only heir in the family, he asked himself, maybe he could endure this kind of life, because sooner or later he would be in charge of the Bennett family and be free. But he also had a sister who was much better than him, and good at managing enterprises, and she had been determined to be the heir of the family. Rick's future life has been bleak since then. He will not get any starports and space stations under the name of the Enterprise or the family, to avoid the dispersion of family assets and power. After his father decided to let Rick marry a noble lady from another family, to achieve a political marriage, although the noble lady looked pretty and charming only from the photos and portraits, Rick, who was unwilling to be bound, resolutely ran away from home, concealed the surname of the Bennett family of the Tarsinus creation family, and joined the Marine Corps under an assumed name, determined to pursue his own future. Why are you crying? Smile. Augustus saw that Rick's face was a little wrong. Rick knew that he must have smiled ugly. From now on, the first squad of the 3rd platoon will be your home. Augustus said, we are all your brothers and sisters. After Rick Kid was assigned to the first squad, there were 13 people in the squad, which exceeded the standard number of staff. The sniper badge on Rick's body and the slender and graceful FN-92 boatswain sniper rifle on his shoulder made the soldiers in the first squad, especially Renault, envious, but Rick was still quite reserved in front of everyone. After a period of getting along, although Rick did not want to discuss his family, Hannick still concluded that he came from a noble or wealthy family because he did not even know how to say a loud swear word. After learning that Augustus had been promoted to Lance Corporal, although everyone in the class was mentally prepared, they were still ecstatic. Lance Corporal is a transitional rank from soldier to non-commissioned officer, which means that Augustus will be promoted to corporal at the same speed. After the surprise, there followed an uncontrollable pride. In the 2 months of getting along in the boot camp, they had already regarded Augustus as their real one of their own. There was no doubt that Augustus had become the soul of this combat squad. That night, Augustus had originally wanted to take the class to a big meal, like he had done in the boot camp to celebrate his promotion, but unfortunately, the 5th Battalion's base only had a supply station and a military canteen that had been airdropped. The camp's cooking squad would only cook a few dishes: stewed potatoes, vegetable soup, and boiled pork sausage. Even such Marines could not always eat such food. In many cases, they could only eat instant food or sweetener sticks. After the training ended at 8 o'clock in the evening, when others were busy doing their own things, playing cards or reading ebooks, Augustus was seriously writing a letter to be sent to his sister and mother. Since leaving Korhal, Augustus always took time to write letters every week. As in the past, in Dorothy's letters, Augustus never talked about the cruelty of the battlefield or politics. He mostly talked about the beautiful starry sky outside Kar and the cultural customs near the garrison. In the letter to his mother, Augustus would ask about the recent situation at home as usual, and occasionally asked about his father and his revolutionary cause. Augustus knew that such a letter would make his father and mother happy. Thanks to Lotus Root Stew Dragon, Clement 001, and Agent Rangran for their awards. Thanks to Yomankianians, Yada who was kicked out, Clement 001, Teng Linxio, the unkillable little hero, Jinghu Yejing, and Waffle Famine for their monthly tickets. Thanks for the investment and recommendation tickets. I found that the web version of the writer's assistant on the computer does not automatically save after the modification. Good guy. I was wondering why some places are still wrong after the modification. Chapter 27, Lone Town. June 20th. Augustus's squad was assigned to perform rather boring tasks. They spent 2 days in the barracks training, and the rest of the time they were assigned to escort supplies from the Pride of Poker Starport. For a whole week, Augustus' squad followed the container trucks around the ring road. At this time, more than a week had passed since Augustus was promoted to Lance Corporal and temporarily took over as the squad leader of the first squad of the 3rd platoon. The Military Affairs Department had not yet assigned a non-commissioned officer to serve as the squad leader, so he was still the acting squad leader. As far as Augustus knew, the squad leaders of other recruits who came to the 1st Company were now served by veterans of the 1st Company. Augustus soon realized that before he was promoted to corporal and became the official squad leader, a new successor might never come. During the escort of supplies, although the attacks of the Kel-morians never occurred, Augustus was always on guard against the enemy's surprise attack. Augustus and his companions' daily lives were monotonous. From the moment they opened their eyes in the morning, they would put on their power armor and board the troop transport armored vehicles. Then, the Marines would spend most of the day in the armored vehicles. During this period, the pride of poker was in a sparse and ordinary calm. The armies of the Kel-morian and Terran Federations were still confronting each other at the Patak River in the city center, but the frontline garrisons did not fire a single shot. Only the artillery units of both sides would regularly fire at the enemy positions, and the buildings and fortifications within the range had long been razed to the ground. In the past year, there has never been a large-scale battle of more than 10,000 people on the planet Telesis II. Both sides occupy half of the land on this planet, and they seem to be satisfied with this. However, Augustus knew that this delicate balance was like a thin ice hanging on a candle flame, and it would be broken by one of them sooner or later. What Augustus was most worried about now was that, if both sides regarded the pride of poker as a breakthrough point, the 33rd Ground Assault Division at the center of the war would face a brutal war. Perhaps the task of escorting the transport convoy and transporting supplies had made the young and energetic recruits tired, so on the morning of June 20th, when Lieutenant Reagan, the leader of the 3rd Platoon, told them that their first company was about to go to a small town called Lune to perform combat missions, everyone except Augustus and Ono began to cheer. Lieutenant Reagan could only sigh. The first battle that Augustus led this group of recruits to win was too easy, so they still did not take the war as a serious matter. Perhaps only after witnessing the death of their comrades and their relatives and comrades leaving them forever, they could become mature. At about noon that day, Augustus led the first squad to line up and walk into the barracks with the giant wolf emblem engraved on the wall. It was the first time for them to use the power armor of the 33rd Ground Assault Division. Since this unit had been serving and fighting in the silver world of Sigma in the ice and snow before, the surface of their armor was also painted silver gray to match the environment. Like the other people's power armor, Augustus also had a creeping gray wolf on his armored chest. This power armor was still the old CMC 200, and some traces of use could be seen inside it, but overall it was much better than those in the boot camp. According to the newly issued supplement to the Class 1 weapon management regulations of the 33rd Ground Assault Division, each member of Augustus's class also received an additional Gauss rifle grenade launcher. In addition, the supply sergeant at the armory also issued them an additional Hellfire flamethrower and a matching parallel double-barreled liquid oil tank, a brand new CMC 230XF heavy power armor, a 7-foot-long single-person rocket launcher and 2 large bundles of rockets, and several people were given a Honey Whisperer heavy machine gun and 4 boxes of ammunition filled with bullet chains. Augustus noticed that all the squads of the Warfield Company, including the medical soldiers, had completed the re-equipment. Obviously, the upper commander of the 33rd Ground Assault Division intended to reorganize the entire 1st Company into the main assault company. Warfield's company has always been known as the Iron Company. It has always been at the forefront of the charge, and often lost more than half of its men after several fierce battles. It is understandable that the 1st Company has received such honors. Even other brother companies think that they deserve better equipment, because this also means that the battalion commander has more sufficient reasons to deploy them in the most dangerous places instead of others. Although these weapons should be legally held by professional sergeants who have undergone professional training, it is obviously unrealistic to dismantle a full combat squad and send a group of people for training during the war. After discussing with Raynor, Augustus decided to give the rocket launcher to Ward, the heavy machine gun to the tall Benjamin, and Omo to act as his deputy with an ammunition box on his back. The flamethrower was given to Hannock, just because according to Hannock himself, he liked playing with fire when he was a child, and it happened that no one else wanted to use this dangerous and difficult to operate weapon. Then Augustus divided the 1st squad into 3 fire teams, each with Hannock and others who had changed their equipment as a core. Augustus led the 1st team, whose members were machine gunner Benjamin Crandall, deputy Tom Ono, rifleman Kurt Josephine and sniper Kid. The 2nd team was led by Raynor, whose subordinates were flamethrower Hannock Hank, rifleman Ilya Kilovsky and Amy Brandon. The 3rd team was led by Alan Runstein, whose members were rocket soldier Connor Ward, grenadiers and a Maximum and Leaper Chinan. Augustus, I think we are still short of a medic. After the weapons were distributed, Raynor said to Augustus, our personnel and weapons are already close to a standard special tactics and mission team, so you should be content. Augustus' face was full of red. We usually call these special teams the elite among the elite. Anyway, these good things will never be given to the new recruits who have only been in the army for a few months. Sooner or later, we will become the elite among the elite, Raynor said. When the first squad of Marines put on new equipment and boarded an Apod 46 transport plane, Augustus believed that they were all completely new. Han exchange was the biggest. The CMC 230XF power armor he was wearing was the famous Firebat armor, which was developed and launched by Prussian Industries. Compared with other models from CMC 200 to CMC 300, the Firebat power armor uses thicker and stronger fine steel armor, and the surface of the armor has a special heat-resistant coating to withstand the hot high-temperature ion flow released by the Hellfire flamethrower. The additional steel plates and insulation make the Firebat armor heavier and larger than the average power armor. The red paint makes the Firebat look more dangerous, and the chest and crotch armor are painted with the emblems of Prussian Industries and the 33rd Ground Assault Division. The Firebat armor of the 33rd Ground Assault Division has been repainted in silver grey, looking like a large silver giant. After some additional modifications towards power armor, the armor plates on his shoulders were replaced with a larger and flatter model for mounting a fixed straight barrel rocket launcher. A more accurate HUD missile aiming eyepiece was installed on his helmet mask, and a belt with 12 automatic aiming rockets and a sharp bayonet was tied towards waist. As the transport plane flew to its destination, Augustus used the HUD display on his power armor shield to browse the mission briefing. The latest mission briefing showed that their destination, the small town of Lune, was 15 miles away from the central city of Pox Pride. Before the war, the permanent population was about 5,000, but now it has shrunk to 2,000. The town is still under the control of the Terran Federation Army, but that area is located in the lower reaches of the Paddock River that flows through the city of Pox Pride, and only one Federal Army battalion is stationed there. The Army battalion is simply unable to monitor the defense depth of more than 10 miles in real time, so there are often scouts of the Kel-morian people entering the federal control area through the Paddock River. The briefing's description of this mission is very brief. According to reliable intelligence, this town called Lune has surrendered to the Kel-morian. The mission of the Warfield Company is to regain control of this town and execute all the townspeople. Seeing this, Augustus couldn't help but open his eyes wide. That's right, it's execution, not arrest. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Traitor. Central Block, Lune Town, local time 1412. 1/3 of the buildings in this colonial town were buried by overgrown thorns, creepers and stemmed thatch. The colonial dome houses and square, straight-edged prefabricated template buildings in the central block stood in front of Augustus and others at regular intervals. Antennas and solar panels were set up on the roofs of these houses to receive signals and store energy. Lune Town is like many towns in Turasys II. Every house looks very similar. Straight roads divide the town into equal areas. It is a typical colonial town grid style. Even outsiders find it difficult to get lost in it. This grid-style town is mostly young colonies. There are a few open trucks and coal trucks parked on the streets. Public facilities such as street lights, signs, and benches have become dilapidated due to lack of maintenance and repair. Apart from that, Augustus can't see a single person. The streets and squares are empty. This is not right. I think they will welcome us like heroes. This scene made Hanik complain. If you come to see them with a truckload of food and fuel, I bet you will become a hero of the whole town, and maybe this place will be renamed Hankton. Renault said in the communication channel. Sounds good. Hanik obviously took it seriously. This is difficult, respected Hanik Hankton. Intelligence says that this whole town is full of rebels. Augustus said. Then tell them to make way for Hankton. Hank said nonchalantly. Assemble at the central square. At this time, the company commander Warfield ordered in the communication channel. Follow your squad leader and comrades closely, and be careful of the ground and behind you. The central square of the town of Lune is the only open space in the town. It is just a piece of open space marked out with lime powder, and the area is about the same as that of a football field. The lawn in the central square was not mowed, and the lush native plants of SYNOPSIS II had taken over the entire open space. Some emerald green multi-segmented insects could be seen in between. In the center of the green space full of vitality was a solitary flagpole, on which hung a tattered federal flag. The entire first company was deployed in the central square of Loontown. The third and second rows, where Augustus was located, were deployed directly below the flagpole, standing behind Warfield. Facing the street on the north side of the square, they were arranged in 4 columns. The first row was deployed on the right wing in the same formation, and the fourth row was behind the left of the third row. Fellow villagers of Loontown, I'm Lieutenant Warfield of the Interstellar Marine Corps. The lieutenant held a radio in his hand, which could be directly connected to the loudspeaker of the Loontown radio station. Someone has reported to the Marines that there are Kel-morian spies here who are spreading lies and deceiving the citizens of the Terran Federation. Warfield said, in order to maintain the purity of the town of Lone and ensure that it remains loyal to the Terran Federation, as the supreme commander of the area, I have obtained an arrest warrant from the planetary governor. I have the authority to order everyone in this town to gather in the central square now and accept our investigation. Those who are found not guilty will be released immediately. But if you refuse to come to the central square for investigation, then, I'm sorry, I will arrest you all. Within 15 minutes, I will give you 15 minutes. Regardless of whether you are a man or a woman, young or old, I don't require you to be on time, but unless you are missing limbs, 15 minutes is enough for you to walk from one end of this town to the other. Don't carry any weapons, or we have the right to open fire first. Lieutenant, our order is to execute the rebels, not arrest them. Reagan, the platoon leader of Augustus, said in the communication channel at the squad leader platoon leader company commander level. If it were up to me, no one should be executed, said Warfield. I will never kill people here, unless I have to. After Warfield finished speaking, the entire first company's communication channel fell into absolute silence. His words were also transmitted to the ears of more than 200 people in the company through the public channel just now, clearly conveying his characterization of this mission. Augustus stood behind Warfield, next to Renault and Hannock. The HUD display system on his mask had been converted to thermal energy display mode, allowing him to see the red figures hiding in residential houses and basements. Through scanning, the 3D real-time models of several residential houses were displayed in the upper right corner of the screen, and a status bar that could be pulled down displayed the wind speed, humidity, and temperature. A few minutes later, the figures on Augustus' HUD screen became more and more. The townspeople of Loontown drove cars close to the ground, or rode maglev bicycles, walking towards the central square in twas and threes. The breathing sound in the public channel gradually became heavier, and Augustus could not help but tighten his grip on the Gauss rifle in his hand. Most of the townspeople who came were holding various weapons, such as mining picks, shovels, engineer shovels, gunpowder automatic rifles from the last century, shotguns and bolt-action hunting rifles. Only a few people were holding electromagnetic or laser weapons. Augustus guessed that they were the organizers and leaders of these people. These townspeople of Loon, who were obviously ill-intentioned, surrounded the square with modified private cars and tractors used for farming. Augustus roughly counted them, and felt that the number of people had exceeded 300, and was still increasing. Warfield first watched all this expressionlessly, and then he closed the mask on his power armor. Including Augustus' power armor, the masks of all the power armors of the 33rd Ground Assault Division were painted with grey-white paint, with the sharp snout of the wolf head, the white fluff on the cheeks, the oblique inverted triangle eyes and the pointed ears. But Augustus always felt that, if he could restrain himself from imagining it as a husky, it would still be quite majestic and domineering. I want to speak to your commander. After the number of the gathered people exceeded 500, about 400 yards away from the front of Augustus, an elected representative stood out from the crowd. I'm him. Warfield replied in the coldest and most inhuman tone of his life. Let those people put down their guns. I swear I will forgive them. This is your last chance. We will never lay down our weapons to defend freedom. The mustached Tulasi man walked up to Warfield and said without giving in, listen, you can't do this. Decades ago, it was my father and our fathers who came here to snatch land from wild beasts and poisonous insects. flatten the land, build houses, and reclaim wasteland. All this today is due to the struggle of several generations of us. The Tillerson man said. And what has the federal government done to help us? They only ask us to pay taxes, taxes, and taxes, but they don't even help us build roads. When cheap industrial products from Tarsinus flooded into the market of Tillerson, the governor's office and the federal government's market regulatory bureau remained indifferent from beginning to end and watched the disaster happen. When local factories declared bankruptcy and countless workers were unemployed, the government hypocritically announced an economic subsidy plan for Tillerson, but it was already too late. If that were all, we haven't seen a penny of the money from the subsidy plan. At this time, a response came from the crowd, and Warfield and the soldiers could only remain silent. When the war came, the Marines not only failed to protect us, but also sent our children to the battlefield. The mustache man became more and more excited, and finally he raised his arms and shouted, "We don't need the Terran Federation, nor do we need the Kel-morians. Lone Town belongs to everyone living here. I ask you to leave here immediately, otherwise my townspeople and I will open fire." This idiot, he had persuaded me. If he had a better attitude in requesting us to leave, maybe that guy Warfield would really pat his butt and leave. In the communication channel of the first class, Renault was furious. He doesn't really think that the fire sticks in the hands of these mud guys can penetrate my knight armor, right? No way, no way. Josephine, who was originally from an aristocratic family in the class, would not empathize with the words just now like Renault, but felt that it was ridiculous for these people to dare to threaten the Marines. A good news yesterday came to the recommendation position. The popular series of science fiction apps will start next Monday. I heard from the big guys in the author group that promotion now depends on the number of readers. Only when the standard is reached can it be promoted. I hope everyone can read the chapter of the day when they have time and support it. Thank you. Thank you for the monthly votes of glory to the eldest son and Lackhill. Chapter 29 Bloody Suppression. The number of townspeople who had gathered had reached 700 or 800, several times that of the first company, but with the cold weapons they had for chopping wood and turning the soil and the hot weapons of the last century, they could only deal with the federal sheriff and local police. Compared with the nobles on the main planet of the Terran Empire and the civil servants in the office buildings, the people in the colonies had honed their tenacity and fearlessness in the struggle with nature. Information was blocked here, and the power of the power armor and the federal government's policy of massacring the revolutionaries were not known to the ignorant villagers in the remote areas. So, you are a revolutionary? And all you want is to get the town of Loon out of the control of the federal government, or to gain more autonomy. Warfield's face was twitching. He didn't want to shoot at civilians. The representative of the town of Loon shook his head. "We are not revolutionaries. We just want freedom. Listen, I sympathize with your experience, but as a Marine who eats government food, I have sworn to protect every citizen of the Federation and eliminate all rebels who intend to split the Federation," Warfield said. "I give you my last warning with my remaining kindness and patience. Put down your weapons, or we will open fire. Think about your family and friends, and you will know how stupid your behavior is." At this time, under the order of Lieutenant Warfield, the first company formed 4 parallel, closed hollow squares with each squad as a horizontal plane and each platoon as a unit. In the middle were soldiers carrying rockets and heavy machine gunners. In the Middle Ages of Earth, this formation was used to deal with cavalry. Now the commander of this unit used it to deal with the situation of being attacked from both sides. Suddenly, with a shout, the crowd crowded towards the first company. They seemed to be sure that the federal army would not dare to shoot them with the charge of massacring civilians, and completely forgot that they could be regarded as armed thugs and terrorists. In Augustus's squad, Tom Omo, who had never seen such a big scene, trembled his hands so much that the people around him thought he was going to shoot. "Don't wet your pants, Omo," said Kurt Josephine, the rifleman standing next to him. "You're the one who peed your pants." Omo tried to boost his morale with the curse words he learned from Hanak, but he always lacked confidence and didn't speak with enough force, so it sounded a bit like a lamb bleating fiercely. "Josephine, stop talking," Augustus said. 10 seconds later, among the townspeople who were still walking towards the center of the square, the closest to Augustus was less than 200 yards away. At this distance, with the help of the automatic aiming system of the helmet, even Renault would not miss. What the hell are they doing? This is not a demonstration, and we are not police officers with sticks and stun guns. Renault said in the channel. Do they really think we will turn around and run? Maybe it will work for the sheriff, but if that happens, we will be the ones who lose our heads when we go back. Enough. Retreat. We will really shoot. At this time, as the moving crowd got closer and closer and Maximum's voice became more and more shrill, nearly 1,000 residents of Lone Town, armed with various weapons, surrounded the central square, with more than 200 guns pointed at Augustus and his comrades. The Marines remained unmoved and raised their guns in unison to aim at the townspeople. Now they just had to wait and see which side would retreat first or fire the first shot. Augustus held the Gauss rifle firmly in his hand. If these people attacked him and his comrades regardless of everything, he would definitely shoot without hesitation. Both sides stopped talking, and the atmosphere in the entire central square was so tense that it seemed to be stagnant. Suddenly, Augustus also felt that those people had gone crazy. Several modified trucks rushed straight towards the Marines in the central square from the streets and behind the houses. And the townspeople, as if they had rehearsed in advance, immediately spread out to both sides, leaving a passage for the trucks. The external frames of the front cabs of those trucks were reinforced with stronger presteel. The copper-colored presteel pipes and steel plates were welded to the original more fragile aluminum frames by melting guns. On some trucks with more crude and wild modifications, steel pipes and steel plates were directly tied to the original frames with thick iron wire. The ordinary glass windows should have been replaced, because there were always one or two pieces of glass that did not match the size of the window frames. These presteel steel pipes and steel plates were covered with deep red rust and brass-colored oil stains, as if they had just been dug out of a garbage dump. The front of each truck was pierced with more than a dozen spikes and blades made from discarded metal strips. The same design can be seen all over the trucks, and there can be seen everywhere the inharmonious extra parts that were forcibly spliced together without regard for the overall beauty and symmetry. There was a spike erected on each axle. At first glance, these violent trucks looked like violent metal hedgehogs. If this did not make the Marines realize the danger of these monsters, the Kel-morian cutter electromagnetic cannons mounted on the front of the truck and the roof of the truck bed were enough to show that the other party was not friendly. Next to each electromagnetic gun sat 4 or 5 operators wearing miners' helmets or wide-brimmed caps, each holding a Kel-morian standard electromagnetic gun. There were 3 modified trucks in total, speeding from the east, west and south of the central square. After the modified trucks passed the crowd, the townspeople ran and charged behind the trucks, using their simple weapons to shoot. Some of them were not the first time to touch the gun, and they shot very accurately, so much so that 2 or 3 bullets hit Augustus' power armor. Augustus just calmly watched the small caliber bullets bounce high after hitting the breastplate, only scraping off a little of the silver gray new paint. Damn it, it's a Kel-morian car. This is indeed something they can do. Warfield immediately gave orders on the communication channel. Fire. Soldiers, use up all the bullets in your hands. Shoot. Shoot at your enemies. In an instant, everyone started pulling the trigger and shooting. There was a modified truck right in front of Augustus. If he didn't stop it, at this speed, it would rush into the hollow square of the Marines in a dozen seconds. At the same time, the electromagnetic cannon on the truck opened fire, but the operator was not accurate, and the landing points of several shells were ridiculously crooked. One of the electromagnetic shells landed more than 100 yards away from Augustus. The spreading light blue pulse wave immediately flattened the land at the landing point, creating a crater several dozen feet wide. In a flash, Augustus made what he thought was the most correct choice. He avoided other parts of the armored vehicle and only aimed at the right front wheel. Augustus turned on the capacitor safety and fired high-frequency bursts at the fastest speed. The butt of the Gauss rifle hit his armored shoulder armor again and again due to the recoil. At the same time, at least 5 people in the first squad, including Augustus, took the same approach. Although the fender of the truck was also modified, it still couldn't resist the Gauss rifle, and the tire was blown up in an instant. The truck lost control immediately, but still plunged into the middle of the Marines. Fortunately, Augustus and others reacted in time and started running to avoid the shooting. The tires of the other two trucks were blown up in the same way by other squads. One of the trucks rushed into the Marines who were dispersing their formations. The truck weighing dozens of tons crushed a soldier who failed to dodge and fell to the ground. A tooth-grinding metal scraping sound and desperate wails came from the communication channel. Chapter 30 The Executioner of the Federation. The surviving electromagnetic gunners on the truck fired at the wreckage of the truck with their electromagnetic rifles in hand, but as soon as they showed their heads, they were killed one by one by Rickard, a sniper in Augustus's squad, using a boatswain sniper rifle. This forced the remaining people to raise their electromagnetic rifles above their heads with both hands and shoot randomly without a target. Soon, with a deafening roar and a sharp sonic boom, the truck in front of Augustus was hit by Ward's rocket, and the fuel tank was immediately ignited. The fire burned around the truck. Several people who were ignited by the flames jumped, shouted, and cried, standing or lying motionless, and then their bodies melted like candles. At this time, the townspeople of Loontown, holding various weapons, also stood a few hundred yards away and shot at Augustus, while other townspeople who only had axes, power pliers and other weapons tried to close the distance between themselves and the Marines. Augustus and his men turned their guns to the townspeople, who had already started charging. Only then did he notice that these people were hiding weapons that were far more dangerous than gunpowder shotguns and hosen pickaxes, bundles of electromagnetic grenades on their waists, and these electromagnetic grenades were probably from the local military factory built by Kel-morian. These people were obviously commanded when they charged, and the distance between them was very wide. However, there should be no Kel-morian regular army soldiers among them. As shown before, they really lack electromagnetic weapons that can penetrate power armor. Several heavy machine guns of the Marine Corps began to roar, and the continuous flames from the muzzles seemed like the lights of the Grim Reaper's parade. Just a few hundred yards away from Augustus, a barrage of spikes raised a bloody mist in the crowd. The people in the front were torn apart by steel spikes accelerated to supersonic speed by electromagnetic coils. Their bodies turned into pieces of meat in a few seconds. The remains of limbs and meat were thrown high into the air and fell like rain, like a punctured balloon. The people standing behind him seemed like scarecrows swept down by the strong wind, like rag dolls nailed to the ground by spikes. Including the town representative who stood up earlier, half of the more than 200 people standing opposite Augustus fell down before he emptied all the spikes in the magazine. Augustus saw that the people who were shot were cut in half by the steel spikes. The power of a steel spike was enough to penetrate 4 or 5 people in a straight line, embedding into the body of the last person and pushing him more than 10 meters away. Since ordinary people have no chance of survival once they are hit by the spikes in the torso or head, only a few people have time to scream and wail in the process. Therefore, on the battlefield, only the sound of machine guns and electromagnetic guns firing and the thunderous roar of rockets can be heard. When Augustus finished the first round of shooting and changed the magazine, it took less than 10 seconds from the start of the shooting to the end of the shooting, and the townspeople collapsed. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Warfield ordered. At this time, the townspeople who entered the square fell in a pool of blood, and most of the bodies were broken into pieces. Some people who were still alive wailed and gradually lost their breath. Other townspeople who had not yet rushed into the central square and could walk ran away in the blink of an eye, looking at those people groaning in pain. Although Augustus reminded himself in his heart that these were a group of thugs who wanted to kill him, and he was just following the orders of the chief, it did not make him feel better. The federal government was accustomed to using bloody massacres to suppress insurgents and revolutionaries, using blood and fear to maintain the stability of the regime, and the executors of its tyranny were not federal police and local security forces, but real troops. Warfield immediately gave the order, "Pursue." The 1st platoon will go to occupy the central gas refinery in Runetown. The 4th platoon will pursue north along Cairns Road, and the 2nd platoon will pursue south along Newland Road, expelling everyone and driving them out of the house. The medics will stay. The 3 platoons immediately executed the platoon leader's order and ran in various directions. The 3rd platoon will be under my direct command, Warfield said at last. Yes, sir. Augustus platoon leader Egan immediately responded. Warfield led the first squad of the 3rd platoon to quickly run to a heavy truck that had overturned on the ground, leaving the other squads on guard. This was the only one of the 3 trucks that was not hit by rocket fire, because there was a Marine under the truck. It was a rifleman from the 2nd squad. The life characteristics monitoring system inside his power armor showed that the soldier was still alive, but they could not move the truck. The container-like cargo box of the truck was full of steel and alloy scraps collected by the people of Runetown. The power armor's enhanced strength was not enough to make them superhuman. We have to find a crane, Augustus said, trying to push the truck. It's too late to transfer it from the engineering regiment of Poker's Pride. Warfield glanced at Augustus and made a prompt decision. Explosives. Unload the fuel tank and choose the D7 type explosives with the smallest power. Augustus understood and turned to Xander. Xander was an art lover. His backpack contained the most complete and largest number of blasting explosives in the 1st squad. Then, under Warfield's command, the 1st squad clearly divided the work to place the explosives, and the location and amount were also decided by him personally. After the explosion, the connection between the truck compartment and the front of the truck was blown open. Due to the different power of the explosives in several locations, the compartment pressing on the Marine fell to one side accurately. Augustus, Raynor and others worked together to pull him out. The Marine's power armor was severely damaged, and many parts of the armor were dented. Augustus guessed that he might have fainted because of the impact, because there was no response in the communication channel. "Are you okay, Private?" Warfield knocked on the Marine's helmet. Seeing no response, he pressed a button under the soldier's helmet visor, and the visor slowly opened. It was a young man with a bruised face and a swollen nose. It can be seen that his injuries were not serious, mostly soft tissue contusions, and the corner of his right eye was bleeding uncontrollably. He might have a slight concussion, and he was drowsy. A medic in power armor walked over, half knelt on the ground, opened the soldier's eyelids, and observed his pupils. The paint color of the medic's power armor was the same as Augustus and others, only a red cross mark was sprayed on the right shoulder of the armor for distinction, and he carried a D1 backpack on his back that was larger than the infantry M2 backpack. When Augustus looked at the medic, he was rummaging through his backpack, looking for a medical laser nail gun to suture the wound. "My equipment is not enough to deal with this situation. We must send him to the nearest medical station." The medic used a weakened laser beam to treat the wounded while opening his mask and speaking to Warfield. He was a pale young man with an ordinary appearance. "The nearest medical station is in Poker's Pride. I will immediately request a transport plane from the command center." At this time, Warfield looked at the people of Lune who were still lying in a pool of blood. Some of the wounded were still wailing weakly. "Augustus, take your people and take the injured locals with you." Most of the bodies of the Lune residents in the central square were broken into pieces. Many of them were broken into several pieces, with blue-black intestines, internal organs, bones, and meat on the ground. Only those whose legs were shot were still alive. Even though Augustus had emphasized that the Marines would treat them, these townspeople still tried to shoot at them, forcing a group of soldiers to shoot back. "Don't they want to live?" Josephine asked in confusion on the communication channel, while receiving the wounded. "Maybe, they just think that there is something more important than staying alive," Augustus replied. Renault and Augustus looked at each other, and inexplicable emotions surged in their hearts. About an hour later, when the transport plane arrived in Lonetown, other troops of the 1st Company had already controlled the town hall, church and station of Lonetown, defeated the townspeople who tried to fight back, and forced them to flee their homes. In the air, filled with the smell of blood, a brand new red and blue flag of the Terran Federation was raised on the flagpole in the central square. Thanks to the monthly tickets of Shipwreck Coco, the pretentious jumping clown, Han Han Ho Ho Han Han Ho Ho Han Han Ho Ho, and Commandlsh. Thank you for your support. Chapter 31 Engineer Corps. 2 days later, after completing the mission in Lunetown and returning to the 5th Battalion's base in Poker's Pride, the 1st class had rested for a while, and Augustus's mood was different from before. Augustus thought that his service in the Federal Army would never be too long. As long as the war was over, he would leave. At 6 a.m. on this day, June 22nd, Augustus woke up on time as usual, woke up the soldiers in the class, and asked them to get dressed immediately and go to the canteen of the battalion base for breakfast. At this time, there were 2 silver moons in the sky, and the outline of another moon and a brighter sun appeared on the horizon. The company dormitory became noisy, and sleepy Marines squeezed into the narrow corridor and swarmed towards the army canteen. Augustus got a toast and fried pork sausage in the cafeteria. He sat at the alloy template table and chatted with Renault across from him, talking about some reports about the corruption inside the federal government disclosed by the Global News Network. Hanuk and Josephine were talking loudly about dirty jokes. Does anyone know where we are going today? I didn't read the mission briefing. Private Zinder held a piece of bread in his mouth, and Hanuk on his left was wolfing it down. The central city of Poke Pride. The specific location should be 8 miles northwest of our camp. Josephine ate the bread without the reserve and elegance of a noble, looking like a starving ghost reincarnated. Guess what? There is an engineering team working there, and the superiors sent us there to be their nannies, because it is very close to the Kel-morian doghouse. As she was talking, Josephine swallowed another whole roasted pork intestine, which almost choked him. He couldn't help but pinch his neck and roll his eyes, and snatched Hanuk's bowl of porridge next to him, and started to drink it. So when the call to assemble sounded, Hanuk and Josephine were both pinching each other's necks. Take your M2 backpacks and assemble at the A-2-7 barracks square. As everyone was laughing, several non-commissioned officers came in and shouted. Regardless of whether they had finished eating or not, all the soldiers did as they were told. Augustus led the first squad into the barracks and armory with the Sigma Grey Wolf emblem engraved on the wall, and put on their power armor. Since it was not too far from the central city, and the 33rd Ground Assault Division had arrived in Telesis less than a week ago, there were few transport aircraft that could fly in the atmosphere for them to use. The first company took the heavy trucks lent to them by the Pox Pride Army Logistics Support Transport Regiment to their destination, and other trucks were loaded with bullets, grenades, and explosives. Each truck could only carry 6 to 8 heavily armored Marines at most. Augustus, Renault and several other first squad soldiers sat in a truck bed, and the entrance and exit of the bed were sealed with a pair of heavy windproof curtains. After the windscreen was folded up, they could see outside the car. There were dozens of similar trucks behind their car. At first, the convoy drove to the north of the base on a straight urban road in Pox Pride. Although there were a few craters on the road occasionally, it was still relatively flat. Once the convoy entered the city center, the speed immediately slowed down. Because this section of the city was once the main battlefield of the war between the Federation and the Kel-morian, it changed hands repeatedly between the two sides in a few months. Now, the entire city center has become a ruin full of huge craters, barbed wire, abandoned war vehicles and tanks, and the skyscrapers stand silently, like the tombstones of this once prosperous city. About 2 miles after driving out of the base, Augustus saw a different scene. A large number of ragged refugees were staggering along the road. The number of these groups ranged from dozens to hundreds. In more than 10 minutes, Augustus had seen thousands of such people. People with dull expressions carried bags on their backs, pushed carts and worn-out suitcases, on which sat silent children or various metal garbage, most of which were robot or car parts. These people were called scavengers by the local garrison of Telesis. With the tacit consent of the local garrison, they made a living by entering the city to search for valuable garbage or other things abandoned in it. The city of Poke Pride, where Augustus's 4th Brigade was stationed, originally belonged to the Terran Federation. It was once a large city with 2 million Terrans, and more workers and farmers lived in the industrial areas and farms outside the city. But after becoming a strategic location, the city has become the main battlefield. In the part of the city controlled by Kel-morian, all the city's population became miners and laborers serving large factories. They were whipped and enslaved by Kel-morian supervisors, and had to work endlessly until they died of exhaustion to produce more weapons and supplies for the war. The Terran Federation forcibly drove all the people in the area under its control to the lower city and suburbs far away from the war zone, but refused to provide living security for the war refugees. Augustus trucked past the group of staggering refugees and drove for a few miles. Finally, it turned beside a long river flowing east-west and drove west along the asphalt road that was pitted by artillery fire. To the north of the convoy was the rippling Paddock River. This river, which was more than 1,000 miles long, looked like a golden ribbon in the bright morning sun. The Paddock River, which flows through the center of Poker's Pride, divides this magnificent city into two in the middle. The widest part of this section of the river in the city center is 5 miles. Before being involved in the war, there were 3 sky train tracks and more than 10 steel bridges connecting the north and south parts of the city into a whole. Hundreds of artificial canals dug, based on the Paddock River and its tributaries, added a unique charm to the city like a water city. The intricate canal network made the barge transportation industry in Poker's Pride increasingly prosperous. During the most prosperous period, the slow-flowing artificial canals of Poker's Pride were not only home to large cargo ships, but also luxury yachts for the upper class and retro sailboats using modern technology. On both sides of the river were towering skyscrapers, office buildings, squares, and parks. Due to the pollution from the prosperous oil refineries and crystal ore purification plants, the sky of Poker's Pride at that time was always filled with crystal dust like thick fog, and the blue canal network was filled with endless, glittering crystal clouds. Since more than 20 years ago, the music, etiquette and literary works of the Middle Ages on Earth have become the favorites of the upper class of Poker's Pride, to show their elegant taste and show off their family's ancient history. The rich sat on expensive and fashionable yachts and cruise ships, listening to the music handed down from the Middle Ages on Earth, while enjoying the beautiful scenery, while the libertines enjoyed themselves. It seemed as if time had returned to London in the Victorian era of ancient Earth, and the rich sat on their boats to tour the Thames. The prosperous city of the past can only be found in documentaries and postcards. Now most of the canals have dried up due to siltation. When the rainy season comes, the swollen river water will refill the river and cause floods. Some blocked artificial canals that have not yet dried up have become stinking ditches, and garbage is floating on the dark green river surface. When the convoy arrived at the destination, the engineering company was clearing the rubble in an area marked out by a cordon, using a molten welding torch to splice together prefabricated modular alloy steel building panels to build military camps, supply stations, garages, and armories. The area where they worked was about 2 miles away from the Paddock River. The division of labor within the engineering company was very clear. While some people drove engineering vehicles to build new military camps, other engineers were busy setting up scaffolding, building water towers and engines, building septic tanks, and laying wires and water pipes underground. Rows of barracks and camp signal control lights rose from the ground at an astonishing speed. Chapter 32 Boundary River. Augustus noticed that these engineers in orange-gray engineering uniforms were still very young. Some of the marks on the uniforms indicated that they were only soldiers temporarily recruited by the Space Marine Corps in the local area. These conscripts were usually refugees. If the war went well, the service time of these conscripts would not exceed 2 years. Now the bridges and train railways on the Paddock River have been cut off by the Kel-morians. The Seven Sisters Bridge, which was famous throughout the colonial world, was either blown up, and the main body of the bridge sank to the bottom of the river, or was submerged in the surging river due to the rising water level during the rainy season. In an area of about 1 mile near the river banks on both sides, all the buildings, lighthouses, piers and green belts have been razed to the ground, replaced by rubble, glass and dust blown by the wind. On the south bank of the Paddock River, there are 2 brigades of the Federation Space Marine Corps, an army division, 2 artillery regiments, a tank armor division and 3 Avengers. To the north was a corps of Kel-morian rippers, and the land on the other side was full of bunkers and sandbag bunkers built by Kel-morian construction workers on the original buildings. After entering the construction site, Captain Warfield arranged tasks for each squad through the platoon leaders, detailing the positions of each squad member at what time, the tasks to be completed by this person, and who was responsible for supervising him. The task of Augustus' squad was to patrol back and forth in an area of about 1 mile near the construction site as a scout, to guard against Kel-morian agents infiltrating. Every 15 minutes, he had to report to the platoon leader through the communication system inside the power armor. For the rest of the day, Augustus' first squad was carrying out its patrol mission. The patrol area was a piece of urban ruins, a piece of broken walls, collapsed walls, cracked bricks and stones, and twisted underground water pipes exposed to the scorching sun. This area was once the most prosperous commercial district in the city center, with tall buildings and the magnificent and gorgeous Rococo-style luxury villas of the rich. Today, only a few of the most tenacious buildings remain standing. The best preserved is a statue of the goddess Europa with only half of its body left. Augustus did not see anyone other than his fellow squads during the mission. When patrolling near the Paddock River, he turned to observe the Paddock River and the Kel-morian positions on the other side of the river with a telescope. Today, the Paddock River is still very clear, as pure as the glacial lake at its source, but the picturesque river banks and the rippling river surface are no longer there. What remains in front of the world are only ruins and the angry and roaring river of sorrow. In this situation, Augustus and others can no longer see the Paddock sister bridge section of the river, which once attracted countless tourists as a tourist destination. Occasionally, they can hear the sound of fighter planes passing over their heads. The river is very open, and the low-power telescope is not enough for Augustus to see the fortifications and firepower points of the Kel-morian army on the other side of the river. On the other side of the river was the fully armed Kel-morian Ripper Corps. In the past 3 years, they had already built arc-shaped fortresses and walls along the river. Inside the dozens of feet-high walls were missile towers, land defense guns and pop-up machine guns. The Kel-morians focused on building the northern bank into an impregnable military fortress in the area, where the flow was slow and easy to cross the river. Augustus often stared at the Paddock River, thinking about how he would cross the turbulent river if he commanded an army, and how he would send his troops to the other side to end the war completely. When the 4th patrol was near the Paddock River, night had fallen, and the sun sank into the earth. Warfield ordered Augustus to return to the new military camp under construction. At this time, the blood-red light of the sunset had disappeared, and the black skyscrapers cut the horizon covered by the moonlight into jagged shapes. Across the river, on the north bank of the Paddock River, hundreds of beams of light from the Kel-morians' laser searchlights swept across the river and the sky, and flares occasionally streaked across the sky. A few miles away from Augustus's class, an artillery position of the Terran Federation began firing, and hundreds of bright ice blue spots fell on the opposite bank. The electromagnetic pulse waves generated by the explosion lit up a patch of the night sky. After returning to the construction site, Warfield immediately asked Augustus to go alone to a garage that had been built with pre-placed pre-steel plates, and his troops were directly commanded by the company headquarters. Augustus originally thought that there was a task that had to be explained in person, or that a meeting of officers had to be held, but he soon discovered that the other officers stayed at their posts. After meeting Warfield, the other party did not keep him in suspense. Your brother arrived at Tillersis 2nd yesterday, and the division headquarters is not far from here. Just now he told me on the phone that he hadn't seen his brother for 7 or 8 years, and asked me to take you to see him. Actors? Ah, that's great. I really want to see him earlier. Augustus didn't want to meet his brother. Then Warfield ordered his new adjutant, a gunnery sergeant, to temporarily lead the 1st company and let them continue these established tasks. This time Augustus drove again, and he and Warfield had a very good relationship now. Because of his brother's relationship, Warfield actually regarded Augustus as his own brother, and he also liked the young man's strength and courage. In Warfield's view, Augustus was very smart, and the most valuable thing was that he used this intelligence in the right way, and his considerate and caring personality was indeed very likable. In some ways, Augustus was very similar to his brother. An hour later, Augustus drove Warfield's Sabre command vehicle into a cluster of skyscrapers with dozens or hundreds of stories high. Outside the skyscrapers were lower buildings with a wide view. This area was once the largest stadium in Poker Pride. Next to it were the amusement park, the zoo and the civic square. About a regiment of engineers were using space construction vehicles to build rows of modular camp dormitories in an orderly manner on the flat and open ground. The Sabre command vehicle drove into the middle of the skyscrapers, and there was still a tall building with lights on in the center of this tall building area. Although the skyscraper was not brightly lit, some floors with intact glass could see bright lights. This meant that there should be a gas generator in the underground garage of the skyscraper, and the laid wires were buried underground. Outside the skyscraper, there were roadblocks and checkpoints within 500 yards, and at least a platoon of Marines from the 33rd Ground Assault Division were guarding the skyscraper. All the Marines were silent, holding Gauss rifles, and looking straight ahead. Some scratches can be vaguely seen on the silver-grey power armor of these Marines, like scars left by long scratches deep enough to see the bone. Those were the marks left by new layers of paint applied over and over again to try to cover up the wounds after the power armor was severely damaged and repaired. Although this obviously violated Article 144 of the Power Armor Modification and Maintenance Regulations, some people's power armors, in addition to the original logo of the 33rd Ground Assault Division, also had other exquisite or sloppy private graffiti and spray paint, usually some parts of the wolf's body, a claw, an eye or a fang. Some people's graffiti was even wilder, with a white wolf skeleton or a naked beauty. This meant that these people were either veterans who left these marks to show that they had experienced many battles, or they were local planetary guards who could not even meet the supply of power armor and had to patch it up for another 3 years. These edge-world garrisons often called themselves stepmothers, or both. There were no military rank marks on the power armor of these guards, and they stood like statues, like stone lions in front of a temple. Thanks to those who are loved by Atago, I will always like Slock AE. I'm lonely. I'm the monthly ticket of Mengsk and Rabbit, and I thank Agent Rangran for the reward. It is recommended on Templars, Worship Me. Chapter 33 Augustus Mengsk. Chapter 33 Augustus Mengsk, the skyscraper that temporarily serves as the temporary headquarters of the 33rd Ground Assault Division originally belonged to the Global News Network. About 1,000 people once worked in this towering building. Now it is deserted and silent like a ghost town. The elevator of the Unbranch building has long stopped running. Augustus and Warfield can only take the stairs to the 42nd floor. This made Augustus begin to wonder if his brother has some kind of bad taste. After climbing the stairs honestly, Augustus finally came to the top floor. Judging from the signs that have not been erased, this floor is the editor-in-chief's office of the local station. The guard at the staircase checked Augustus and others' ID information cards and completed retinal scans before letting them in. There was no guard guarding the door of the division commander's office. There was an oil painting of a lion hanging on the door. Arcturus has always liked this kind of earth creature that only exists in literary works and film and television works, and has always longed to defeat this majestic beast one day. Warfield carefully checked whether his uniform was neat and smooth before knocking on the door solemnly. "Come in." Arcturus' voice was very similar to Augustus's. Most of the time, it was magnetic, gentle, and calm, and could make people feel close to him in an instant. "Aren't you going in?" Augustus looked at Warfield, who had stepped aside. "This is a private conversation between you two," Warfield said seriously. "Point okay." Augustus thought to himself that, since you are not going to see Arcturus, why bother to meticulously smooth out the wrinkles on your uniform? When Augustus pushed the door open and entered, his brother Arcturus Mengsk was standing with his back to him, standing in front of a huge glass window, and looking at the Pride of Pok in the dark. Arcturus was wearing a dark brown officer's coat, and the shoulders of the coat were covered with tasseled copper epaulettes. Although it was a temporary structure, the furnishings in the office still made it clear at a glance that it was the residence of a noble. Arcturus' desk was made of expensive Chatsera sunwood. The tabletop, which retained the original wood texture, was only painted with a layer of anti-corrosion and dehumidification varnish. Countless small sun patterns several feet long were clustered and beautiful. There were piles of documents and books on the table. Augustus noticed the only upright wooden framed photo on the table. It was a photo of Arcturus, himself, his sister Dorothy, and his mother, when he was 20 years old. Augustus did not recognize himself in the photo for a moment, because standing between his mother and brother were two little girls who looked very similar, wearing silver twin ponytails and white long skirts. Augustus thought that one day he must destroy this photo. There was a carpet on the tiled floor, and the carpet was embroidered with gold thread on the star map of the Terran Federation in the Kaprulu sector. Next to the desk were two wine cabinets with gin locks, which were filled with wine, whiskey and ale produced by the Federation from core planets, autonomous territories to marginal planets. This was obviously due to the Mengsk family's consistent preference for alcoholic beverages. The wall opposite the office chair was covered with beast heads and hunting rifles, and on the other wall was a portrait of Augustus' mother, Terran Mengsk. This was painted by an artist in the 25th century using the art style of the Renaissance period on the Middle Ages. The artist seemed to have referred to the painting of the Virgin Mary and portrayed Catherine in a red evening dress as extremely sacred and radiant. "Augustus, my brother. Come here, let me see you." Arcturus heard the sound of the door opening and immediately turned around. His face, which was as if cut by a knife and an axe and carefully carved by a Greek sculptor, was filled with a smile from the heart. Augustus felt that his brother's smile was genuine. Although Arcturus himself had never admitted this, his father's habits and style of doing things as a politician had repeatedly influenced him. People always say that politicians have 1,000 different masks, and this is true for Arcturus. Augustus's tense shoulders relaxed, and he walked towards Arcturus without any defense, just like in his memory. "I heard that you defeated a group of Kel-morian shock cavalry on the first day after graduating from boot camp." Arcturus was taller than Augustus, and compared to Augustus, who was only in his early 18s, the 28-year-old had broader shoulders. Colonel Arcturus was a man with a strong back and a steel-like solidity. When he looked at others calmly, there was a sense of oppression without anger. "Haha, guess what I said to the staff officer who reported this to me? I said that the Mengsk family should be like this." Arcturus patted Augustus's shoulder vigorously and looked at Augustus with satisfaction as he stood still like an iron tower in the wind. "My luck is always good." Augustus also smiled and said, "The group of Kel-morians just happened to break into our resting place. Then I have to admit that your luck is really outrageous." Arcturus' cold grey eyes were bright, as if they were flashing with light. Since he joined the army, he has not returned to Korhal to see his family for 7 or 8 years. Even if he has, it is only a brief cross-galaxy video call with very unstable picture signals. Only rarely, the supply fleet that travels between Char, Sigma and Tarsinus for 2 years will hand over letters from home, recent photos of family members, and quarantined hometown specialties to the soldiers when delivering supplies to the marginal galaxies. Arcturus' father Angus never wrote to him, only Catherine and his younger brothers and sisters always sent things, and wrote letters to the eldest son of the family. When he was young, Augustus regarded his brother, who was a soldier, as an idol, and he respected and loved the heroic brother in his heart. Although he became more and more rebellious as he grew up, he would still send his brother some local specialties year after year, such as the cold weapons forged by the Stilling Master Craftsman Association for the nobles and the rich, and the King No. 7 whiskey produced in Pasha, the central city of the Korhal subcontinent. Augustus always asked about Arcturus' military life and emails, looking forward to exciting adventures and glorious legends. The most recent impression of Arcturus about his brother was Augustus when he was 14 years old. At that time, Augustus looked like a rebellious teenager with long hair, ponytails, pierced ears and tattoos. In the end, Angus personally dragged Augustus to the best laser plastic surgery shop, instilling to repair the ear holes and remove the tattoos. The most advanced laser plastic surgery technology can now perform plastic surgery without invasiveness and sequelae, so others can't see any traces left on Augustus' ears. In the end, only Augustus's hair was spared, but he cut it off quickly, because some people always thought he was a girl. Arcturus was very happy that Augustus had lost his youthful impetuousness and became calm and self-sustaining. He was originally worried about his younger brother. "How is Mom?" Arcturus pulled to chairs and sat down with Augustus, chatting with him about family matters naturally. "Mom is fine," Augustus said. After Dorothy turned 16, Mom took the lead in establishing more than a dozen charitable foundations and orphanages in Stilling. Mom is admired in Car. She is very busy every day, but also very fulfilling. "What about Dorothy? She no longer writes to me." Arcturus nodded, but then said with some sadness, "Her schedule at the academy is always very full. In addition to classes, she also has to learn etiquette, dance, and court swordsmanship." Augustus said, "Dorothy is a big girl now. She is as beautiful and charming as her mother now." "Yes, Dorothy has grown up." Arcturus paused and said, "When Arcturus was still studying in Car, Dorothy and Augustus were still children sitting on his lap and playing. Does she have many suitors?" Chapter 34. Conversation between brothers. Sweeters? Augustus' memory flashed back to some young Korhal nobles with bruised faces and noses. They should all go to hell, Augustus said, and the following scene emerged in his mind. At Dorothy's 16th birthday party, half of the celebrities in Stilling attended the grand banquet, and their sons and daughters all dressed up. There were so many nobles holding flowers and wanting to meet Dorothy that they could line up from the Mengsk Sky Tower to the door of the Palatine Council Hall. From the young noble heirs who had just come of age to the youngest Korhal senator, everyone was blocked from Dorothy's sight by Augustus and his father. No matter men or women, old or young, they all wanted to dance with Miss Dorothy, the protagonist of the birthday party, but in the end, it was Augustus who danced with Dorothy. Dorothy is still young. She doesn't understand the ugly and dark hearts of those fat-headed aristocratic scum. Arcturus took a cup of black tea from the table, took a sip, and said without any malice, "Those deformed children from inbreeding really make me sick. They only understand politics, power, and fame and fortune, and plan to use a political marriage to tie their family to the Mengsk family. As long as we are alive, Dorothy will never become a victim of politics and power. She will be happy forever. You really should go back to your hometown to see Dorothy. She is no longer the little girl in your memory." Augustus smiled and said, "Dorothy is very opinionated, which is very much like her mother. Dorothy likes reading very much, economics, politics, classical culture and even galactic heroic epics. In terms of corporate management and business decision making, Dorothy has shown much higher talent than you and me. Dorothy should inherit the Mengsk family, and we just want to break away from our father's control and explore the unknown world above the stars, or establish great achievements in the army." Arcturus pointed at himself and then at Augustus, "But I'm worried that Dorothy will be under too much pressure. After all, she is just a girl. If that's the case, I think I will go back to help her." Augustus said what he really thought. Compared with the battlefield, he would rather stay in the safe Korhal. Arcturus was obviously surprised. This was not the Augustus he remembered. In the nearly 10 years since Arcturus joined the army, Augustus wrote to him at a high frequency of 3 letters per month, so that there were so many emails in his email box that he couldn't finish reading them. In these letters, Augustus, without exception, expressed his yearning for his brother's free and easy military life, complaining about his father's despotism and the boredom and depression of being trapped under the small blue sky of Korhal. Young Augustus longed to become a marshal who could lead the Space Marines on adventures, establish colonies, and fight against strange alien creatures. Augustus had sworn no less than 10 times that once he could leave Korhal without his father's control, he would never go back. Although Arcturus had explained to Augustus countless times that the life of the Marines was actually extremely boring, Augustus never changed his mind. "No matter what, I will always support you." Arcturus nodded. Despite this, Arcturus was still happy for Augustus's change. Because no matter how much he believed in his brother's ability, there was no guarantee that Augustus would be unscathed on the battlefield. Selfishly speaking, Arcturus would rather his brothers and sisters stay in an absolutely safe place than let them break their young wings for their dreams. "But I'm still worried." Arcturus's frowning eyebrows revealed his inner worries. "You know what that bastard Angus is doing? He dreams of overthrowing the government of the Terran Federation, and he is putting it into practice. With the secret funding of the Imogen Council, the rebel forces controlled by Angus have destroyed the outpost war factories of the Edge colonies and instigated so many demonstrations in recent years that the federal parliament of Tarsinus is terrified. What exactly does he want to do? If this continues, it is only a matter of time before a full-scale war breaks out between Korhal IV and the federal government of Tarsinus. The federal parliament will never sit idly by and watch Korhal escape from their control. Once they admit that a planet can declare independence from the only government, other planets will follow suit. Then the federal government will send the Marines, and maybe Korhal can hold on for a while with the help of Imogen. But the federal parliament also has a huge fleet that can destroy the defense of an entire planet from high orbit. Arcturus said. Angus never thought that if he failed, his family would be sent to the guillotine. Angus is playing with fire. How many innocent people have lost their lives because of his justice when his rebels organized terrorist activities against military facilities and companies in which the Tarsinus creation family held shares? Did those workers, those ordinary soldiers really deserve to die? I don't care about Angus and his revolutionary cause. He deserves it, no matter what the outcome is. But what about Dorothy and Mom? We can't lose them. I'll try my best to convince my father. Augustus was not very confident in what he said. You can't convince a stubborn old wolf. Arcturus snorted. Augustus sighed softly, and both sides were silent, as if they were deeply touched by the stubbornness of old Mengsk. After a while, Arcturus skipped the topic and talked about his plans. Augustus, I will probably be discharged from the army before the end of the war. Maybe early next year, maybe this year. Before that, I hope you can become an officer. Why? Augustus looked at Arcturus. Arcturus, who had been promoted to colonel during the Battle of Kel-morian, was almost certain to become a general after the war. He had more medals and honors than anyone else in his lifetime. After the victory of the war, glory, fame, power and wealth would all come in droves. I'm tired of this kind of life. Arcturus confessed, the freshness and excitement that the Marine Corps brought me have long since worn out. Now I want to regain my original dream and become an interstellar adventurer and explorer. I already have some startup capital. Of course, it's not from Angus. I've planned to buy all their magnetic resonance imaging monitors, drilling rigs, space engineering vehicles and spacecraft. I'm also going to hire some people, but I'll have to take out a loan for the money. Then, I estimate that it will take several to more than 10 years to find a crystal vein that will make me rich. Augustus immediately showed a stunned expression. He remembered that his brother would abolish the Terran Federation government through an uprising in the future and establish the Emperor of the Terran Empire. In the game, Augustus Mengsk, the founder of the Terran Empire, is an interstellar hero, a sophisticated and ruthless politician and conspirator. And now, the future Emperor of the Empire told his younger brother that he was not interested in anything and just wanted to go mining with a safety helmet. If the funds are not enough, go to your mother. Augustus quickly accepted this fact. No, I just want to prove that we can do well without relying on the power of the family, Arcturus said. Augustus was silent. Because of his rebellious psychology towards his father, Arcturus at this time extremely hated revolution and politics. He just wanted to take risks and become a wealthy miner by exploring new veins in the unknown marginal areas of the universe and become a rich man through his own efforts rather than inheriting the industry of his father and family. When I'm not with you, be careful of those who have ulterior motives. After a moment's silence, Arcturus said to Augustus earnestly, except for the people of the Mengsk family, except for ourselves, no one is worthy of our trust. You are the wolf of the Mengsk family, you must be ruthless. Augustus nodded seriously. Well, I almost forgot. Let your people prepare quickly, but don't mention this to anyone else. Arcturus finally said, after tomorrow, the number 6 operation plan of the Terran Army and Marine Corps Supreme Command will no longer be a secret. We will launch a general offensive against the Kel-morians on the other side of the Pride of Poke and force them to fight a decisive battle here. Thanks to Yamato vs Leviathan, Agent Rangrong, let's see, and Dazao Cheskar for the rewards, and thanks to Liu Zitong, Yamato vs Leviathan, Agent Rangrong, Dazao Cheskar, and glory to the eldest son for the monthly tickets. Thank you for your support. To be honest, the results on the first day were not very good, and it was a bit uncomfortable. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35, Battle of Poker's Pride. When Augustus returned to the first squad, Renault and his squad were resting in the tent of the engineer corps, using a charcoal stove found in the ruins and a well-preserved wok to heat up individual rations and sweet pies. The atmosphere in the tent was very lively, and Harnack's unique and arrogant laughter could be heard even from a distance. Augustus only found out after he entered that the new recruit's salary for last month had arrived. Just as Warfield had agreed before, everyone in the first squad received an extra 8,000 credits as compensation for the Adine crystals they surrendered after defeating the Kel-morian assault cavalry last time, which meant that everyone became rich in the barracks. Renault, Omo, Zinder, Hanak and other poor boys from the countryside were ecstatic, but they all used the money in different places. Renault and Omo sent the money to their parents to ease the financial burden on their families. Xander was born in the slums and had no relatives, so he chose to save it, while Hanak planned to use it all to treat his brothers to a feast or go to the bar. The surprise did not end there. Augustus' platoon leader, Lieutenant Reagan, was also in the tent. Reagan told Augustus that he had been promoted to corporal, and now there was an equilateral triangle under the 3 inverted V patterns on his shoulders. From that day on, Augustus officially served as the squad leader of the 1st Squad of the 3rd Platoon of the 1st Company of the 5th Battalion. Everyone was very happy that day, even Ward, who was usually withdrawn and taciturn, and the new sniper kid smiled happily. "Boss, what did Warfield ask you to do?" After chatting for a while, Renault remembered this. "Oh, I went to the division headquarters with him." Augustus found a folding chair and sat down. "What are you going there for?" Renault pondered. "Are you going to be transferred to the division headquarters as a staff officer soon?" Hearing Renault say this, everyone's faces that seemed to be shining with joy suddenly dimmed. "How is that possible? How capable am I to be a staff officer?" Augustus shook his head and laughed. "Don't you know yet?" Reagan, who was sitting on the ground, said in confusion. "Augustus is the younger brother of our division commander." "You mean that division commander's last name is also Mengsk?" Hanak's mouth was wide open enough to fit several eggs. "Hank, you idiot, you don't even know who the commander of our division is, or what his name is." Renault laughed, and it was unknown what he was happy about. Although Renault didn't know what his division commander's name was, it didn't stop him from laughing at Hanak. "Awesome." Omo felt that he should say something, but after saying this, he just felt that he was redundant. This matter seemed to have nothing to do with whether Augustus was awesome or not. "Yeah, the squad leader is awesome," Amy Brandon said with a smile. "So we have a backer?" Josephine seemed to care about this matter. "You actually hid such an important thing from us." Xander was frustrated. Everyone in the class, including the platoon leader, Lieutenant Reagan, was very curious about this matter, and Augustus answered all the questions he had. Although Augustus did not mention the status and power of the Mengsk family on Korhal IV, everyone had already reached a consensus that Augustus' family must be very wealthy. However, soon, everyone in the class lost interest in Augustus' family composition and the status of his family on Korhal IV, and turned to discuss other things. Augustus was also happy about this, and he really didn't want to say too much on this issue. After a while, the topic gradually turned to the topic of the bar, and which bar girl had the most explosive figure. Just as platoon leader Reagan was about to leave, Augustus decided to talk to his subordinates and Reagan about what Arcturus said about the general attack on the Pride of Pork. Anyway, by tomorrow at the latest, all the garrisons in the Pride of Pork should know about this matter. Actors told me that we are about to go to war with the Kel-morians on the other side of Poke's Pride. Augustus looked at Reagan and his men and said, "You saw today that the Paddock River is extremely wide. This means that we have to swim to the other side of the river in iron sheets and use our flesh and blood to block the Kel-morians' gun holes." As Augustus said, if the Federal Army wants to launch a general offensive in Poke's Pride, they must first cross a turbulent and wide river, and after landing, they must brave the hail of bullets to smash the city defense walls and the concrete fortresses wrapped in a layer of iron sheets and presteel plates, and then they can confront the Kel-morian rippers hiding in them. Under the anti-aircraft fire blockade on the other side, most of the transport ships of the Federal Airborne Division will be shot down before landing, and the bomber fleet will be greatly restricted. Therefore, the Federal Army has only two choices: to build a pontoon bridge under the Kel-morian close-in defense guns and machine guns, or to drive a large number of ferries and assault boats to force a crossing. But now is the flood season. The water level of the Paddock River is the highest and the flow rate is the fastest in the year. In this case, the Kel-morians on the north bank are like guarding a natural barrier. It can be predicted that the Federal Army will suffer huge casualties in this upcoming war. The people in the tent stopped talking. After they reacted, their performances were different. Everyone knows that war will kill people. The only difference is who will die, or if you are destined not to live to the day of retirement. When, where, and how should you die? Renault couldn't laugh anymore. He lowered his head, probably thinking of his family. Hanak and others just stared at Augustus as if they didn't understand what was going on. Ward, who hated the Kel-morians to the bone, had a tense face. In order to take care of his comrades' emotions, he did not show his abnormal joy. At this time, Omo had taken out a piece of paper and silently wrote his third suicide note to his family. Anyway, it will be useful, he said in a low voice. I'm not surprised, Reagan said. The higher-ups have transferred an entire Onyaru Sigma Corps, plus the local army. There are nearly 100,000 people stationed in Pox Pride. This is not to let us come here to eat empty salaries and travel. The generals are not that kind. The Kel-morian has been entrenched here for so long, and there are only 20,000 or 30,000 people. Why should we be afraid to fight? He said sarcastically. No matter how powerful the Kel-morian cannons and machine guns are, the lives of the Marines are not as valuable as their bullets. But you don't have to be too scared. The fleet will definitely participate in the battle. As far as I know, Alpha Squadron, Delta Squadron and more than a dozen Air Force wings from Tarsinus have arrived in Turisas. At that time, the pressure on the ground forces will be much lighter. Reagan looked at everyone and said, what a joke. Hanak has never known what fear is. Hanak jumped up like a cricket that was provoked. Yes, we are never afraid. We are only afraid when we have no money. Renault was no longer sad at this time. He looked up at Hanak, who jumped up and grinned. Will the war start tomorrow? Omo asked, putting the written suicide note in his pocket. Not so soon, Augustus said. It takes time from the distribution of documents to various troops, the division of each division to the command of various generals, to the completion of offensive preparations by all troops and logistics. Reagan said as he opened the curtain of the tent and waved to Augustus and others. I will keep this matter confidential, so as not to be accused of leaking confidential information. The prison food in the Marine Corps Central Security Agency is not very delicious, he said. I'm going back to work. Don't take a break, all of you. After dinner, go out and continue to stand guard. Chapter 36 Crossing the River. As Reagan said, 1 week after the offensive preparation order of the Pox Pride Campaign Command Post was issued, in early July, the 4th Brigade of the 33rd Ground Assault Division, where Augustus was stationed, officially set out. Augustus was only a corporal, and he was not qualified to know more details about this battle. Even the platoon leader Reagan was told that he could only understand the part about his own troops in the pre-offensive order of June 23, 2488. That is, Augustus Mengsk's 33rd Ground Assault Division 2nd and 4th Brigade set out from the lower city of Pox Pride 7 days later, at 1 am on July 1st. Cross the river from the ferry of Yesha town, 20 miles away from Pox Pride in the lower reaches of the Paddock River, detour to the town of Valona in the eastern part of the Pox Pride city area controlled by the Kel-morian, and launch the attack at 1 am on the second day, July 2nd. The 7th and 8th Avenger wings of Alpha Squadron and the 1st Bomber Wing will provide fire support for the attacking forces. In the early morning of July 1st, Augustus and his squad had already put on their power armor and were ready to go. Due to the lack of sufficient vehicles, the 4th Brigade and its brother brigades had to march quickly to the ferry in Yesha town. Augustus' squad, wearing CMC power armor, lined up in 4 columns and followed the platoon leader Reagan of the 3rd platoon on a dusty dirt road. In front of them was the 4th squad of the 2nd platoon, and behind them was the 2nd squad of the 3rd platoon. The distance between the squads was about 40 yards. The sound of the power boots stepping on the ground was like a dull drum, like the sound of a metal giant running on the ground. Whether Augustus looked forward or backward, the helmets that kept rising and falling, and the shoulders with the wolf head emblem were endless. A silver-grey torrent was advancing tirelessly on the dark green land of Tulissis at an average speed of 5 miles per hour. At this time, Augustus couldn't help but think that, if a ground assault division with a number of 20,000 to 30,000 people was fully equipped with power armor, the military expenses paid by the Terran Federation would be unimaginable. This can also indirectly prove why, even with the size of the Terran Federation, the people would feel deeply overwhelmed if so many planets with tens of billions of people had to share the burden of the same war. As Augustus and others were running, large trailers and self-propelled artillery vehicles loaded with arc tanks and Goliath armed robots rumbled by from time to time. Whenever a trailer full of tanks and walking mechas passed by the soldiers, the tank soldiers and mecha drivers on it would wave to the soldiers. At the same time, there was always an Avengers team of about 45 fighters in the sky to escort the marching army. While following the troops, Augustus was still thinking about what the other parts of the offensive pre-order should be. Judging from the movement of the 2nd and 4th Brigades, the Supreme Command obviously did not stick to launching an attack from the front of the Paddock River, but chose to launch an attack from the flank of the Pride of Pok controlled by Kel-morian. But the troops that detoured to the flank were obviously more than the troops of these two brigades. Such a movement was obviously very powerful, and Kel-morian could not fail to discover the large-scale movement of the Federal Army. If the purpose of the Supreme Command was to let these troops launch a surprise attack, it would probably not have much effect, unless these Kel-morians were blind and deaf. Just as they were thinking, a thunderous roar suddenly came from the top of Augustus and others' heads. Some people stopped and looked up at the sky, causing the officers to roar. The communication channel of Augustus's class came with exclamations full of dirty words. Above them, a spindle-shaped space station was falling. This huge space station released extremely bright light when it was still in the atmosphere. From the position of Augustus and others, it was a huge fireball falling rapidly from the sky. With a loud bang, the huge fireball fell into the jungle far away from the army. It seems that the battle on the Telesis synchronous orbit has come to an end. When the vanguard of the 4th Brigade and the 2nd Battalion in the middle had arrived at Yesha town and crossed the Paddock River through the ferry to the other side, the Kel-morian reconnaissance plane finally arrived. When Augustus's squad stepped onto the land on the north bank of the Paddock River on an open steamer, converted from a civilian boat, the reconnaissance plane had already been driven away by the Federation's Avenger fighter. The width of the river section at the Yesha town ferry is narrower than the section that flows through the center of Pok's Pride. On the other side of the river is an undeveloped land, and the height of the wormwood is even higher than Augustus' knees in power armor. The soaked wormwood on the river bank is very slippery, and Augustus had to use the hook-shaped telescopic nails on his power boots to nail himself into the mud to avoid slipping and rolling into the river. Before the 5th Battalion, a poor fellow from the 3rd Battalion fell into the Paddock River because he fell on the riverbank. Now, a dozen local fishermen were trying to fish him out in boats. Not only that, this guy was nailed to the pillar of shame. Every time a unit passed by this ferry, the sergeant guarding the ferry would use this as an example to remind the later ones to be cautious. After crossing the Paddock River, the battalions of the 4th Brigade continued to move north. The green vegetation on the north bank was more abundant and denser than that on the south bank. The Marines sometimes had to move forward in the jungle as tall as a person. Fortunately, they were wearing power armor and were giants far taller than ordinary people, so they would not lose sight of the people in front. At this time, the sun had just risen in the sky, and sporadic gunshots were heard from the distance from time to time. Augustus estimated that the vanguard troops had run into the Kel-morian scouts. Augustus had never seen even a single Kel-morian, and he always paid attention to the sky and his feet to guard against mines and sudden bombers. But so far, everything was going well. It was not until 2 o'clock in the afternoon that the 5th Battalion, where Augustus was, walked out of the jungle. Outside the jungle was an undulating open area, and the vague shadows of some houses could be seen in the distance. In the northeast of the jungle, at 2 o'clock where Augustus was, there were several high grounds connected by trenches. Near the high ground was a small village, and a dozen wooden houses were burning. When Augustus just stepped out of the jungle, the vanguard in front of him exchanged fire with a Kel-morian army. There was a Kel-morian artillery position at 10 o'clock, and the shells whizzed over the heads of Augustus and others. One of them landed not far to the right of Augustus, and a mud column composed of mud, grass roots and shrapnel rose from the ground like a fountain. Large pieces of mud fell within 100 yards, and finally left a crater about 20 to 26 feet in diameter, and about 10 feet deep. The shock wave nearly knocked Augustus, who was wearing a power armor, to the ground. Some reflected shrapnel swept across his abdominal armor and shoulder armor, creating 1 finger deep dents. The squads where the shells landed immediately dispersed and fell to the ground, while Augustus jumped directly into the previous crater. "What is our mission?" Augustus asked in the squad platoon communication channel. "Our target is the Z-103 Highland at 2 o'clock. Platoon leader Egan shouted in the communication channel. Run and shoot. Thanks to Yemenkianians, Yaran Giumo, Shu Huang number 01, XMD01, Fiche Sharo Shiro, and Bazyadipu for their monthly tickets. Thanks to Command Lvsh for the reward, the recommendation ticket and the investment, and the support. Chapter 37, Kel-morian Labor Auxiliary Army. Augustus ordered his men to advance in 3 4-man fire teams, and then he followed the Marines in front of him with his Gauss rifle in his hand, and began to charge. In front of him, at least hundreds of silver-grey armored Marines from the 4th Brigade were running forward at the same time. Several Avenger fighters of the Federal Air Force passed hundreds of feet above their heads. The missiles mounted under the wings fell on the distant Kel-morian positions with dense smoke in a few seconds, setting off a series of dazzling orange-red spots. Just in front of Augustus' left, an artillery position was still firing at this place. Several electromagnetic shells fell in the middle of a platoon in front of him, bringing up several bloody limbs and arms or helmets with skin and bones. But when Augustus stepped over a Marine who fell to the ground, a deafening explosion came from the direction of the shells. Under the concentrated attack of the Federal bomber group, this Kel-morian artillery position immediately silenced. Since the warnings from the Terran Federation scouts and reconnaissance aircraft were not passed to the commander of the 4th Brigade in time, everyone thought they were just heading towards an undefended town. Many people even naively thought that there, in the destination town of Valina, the local residents had already boiled hot water and they were just waiting to enjoy the local food. Then they would sleep in the comfortable wooden houses for the whole afternoon, so that they could launch the attack in the early morning of the next day. Unexpectedly, there were only a group of crazy Kel-morians in the town of Valina. The command system of the Marine Corps was somewhat chaotic at first, but soon, each battalion and company knew which position they should capture, or provide cover for that brother unit in friendly forces. Where are those damn Kel-morians? Don't let me catch them. Raynor asked while running in the communication channel of the 1st Squad. I'm going to smash their heads. Ward screamed in the communication channel. What happened? The mission briefing clearly said that there should be no Kel-morian troops here. Amos said. But now we have it, Tom. Augustus said, follow me, follow your team leader. There are 2 battalions of nearly 1,000 people ahead of us. When they rush to the hill, we just need to go up and congratulate them. Don't rush too far forward. This will not do any good to you or any of your comrades. Do you understand? Yes, squad leader. No problem, boss. A positive answer came from the communication channel. The soldiers of the 1st Squad followed their squad leader closely. It turned out that what Augustus said was not wrong. As early as when their squad was still trekking in the jungle, a battalion of the vanguard of the 4th Brigade had already launched an attack on the Z-103 hill. When they rushed to the foot of the hill, the red and blue flag of the Federation had already been raised. Lieutenant Reagan was not far from Augustus at that time, with the 2nd Squad of the 3rd Platoon. So the 3rd Platoon quickly assembled under the hill. Under the order of the platoon leader, the troops bypassed the Z-103 hill and headed northeast to the town of Virino. At this time, the several positions that the Kel-morians had built on the high ground had been captured by the Federal Marines. A part of the Kel-morians evacuated the high ground at the last moment and fled to the town behind the high ground. At this time, Augustus's task became to pursue these fleeing enemy troops. The 3rd row entered the town of Valina along a country gravel road that was only 10 feet wide. On the way, they also did not see any Kel-morians. One by one, the squads and platoons of the Federal Marines were caught up by them. Augustus only saw a few Kel-morians' bodies. This was also the first time he saw the Kel-morians' regular army other than the assault cavalry, not the holographic projection in the boot camp. Unlike the unified CMC-200 power armor of the Federal Army, just as these Kel-morians used all the materials they could find to build heavy armored vehicles and tanks, almost no 2 of their armor and weapons were exactly the same. Only the tallest, strongest, and most skilled of the Kel-morians wore armor that was highly similar to the CMC power armor. At first glance, the Kel-morian power armor looked no different from Augustus's, except that a layer of black paint had been applied over the original paint. The Kel-morian style of violent transformations covered almost the entire body of the armor. For example, the one in front of Augustus had sharp copper nails nailed to every part of the power armor. to sharpen toolessy hunter daggers welded directly to his shoulder armor, and the black armor was painted with messy graffiti with white paint. The only thing Augustus could recognize was the unique emblem of the Kel-morian Reaper that he had learned about in boot camp, a spiked hexagonal warhammer that broke through the window with glass shards. The rest were even stranger, with animals and symbols of unknown meaning. Augustus guessed that this was the emblem of the Kel-morian warriors family or guild. Augustus knew that those who were qualified to wear power armor were at least elite veterans or foremen of the Kel-morian guild or above. As for the other Kel-morian warriors, their equipment was much more shabby. More than half of the soldiers only wore blue-green woolen uniforms and used smaller Kel-morian electromagnetic rifles as weapons. Some wore suspenders and jumpsuits. This multi-pocket uniform was obviously more like work clothes than military uniforms. Others were equipped with more luxurious equipment. They wore round helmets with a ridge in the center and goggles. There were two capital letters kilometers arranged vertically from top to bottom on the helmet. In addition to the uniforms, these soldiers also wore rough armor made of kinetic armor plates and thick leather pads. This armor was far inferior to the Federal CMC series armor that could provide power, and the armor coverage rate was also very low. The better ones could cover the calves and forearms, and the worse ones only covered the part from the torso to the thigh. The proportion of this kind of soldiers in the Kel-morian army is much higher than that of the Reapers who can wear power armor. Before they took up arms and set foot on the battlefield to fight the federal army, they were just miners in the factories of various guild mines. After the outbreak of the Kel-morian War, these people were recruited by the guild government. This is the Kel-morian Labor Auxiliary Army composed of a group of miners. They lack armor, but have an indomitable will. Augustus's squad moved forward and saw more corpses on the road, including some federal soldiers killed by mines. The battle in the town of Valina has subsided. Burnt houses can be seen everywhere. Federal soldiers are dragging the bodies of Kel-morians to the center of the town, loading them on trucks, and transporting them to other places for burial. This afternoon, Augustus and the soldiers in his squad squeezed into a house they were assigned to rest, preparing for the general attack tomorrow morning. All the houses were crowded with sweaty Marines, and more people had to set up tents in the town. No one knew where the natives of Valina had gone. Chapter 38 Resocializing Soldiers. At midnight the next day, Augustus and the soldiers of the first squad crawled out of the sheets and blankets on the ground and assembled at the designated location in the town of Valina. The assembly place of the 5th Battalion was an open area in the center of the town, which was once used as a market by the locals. Augustus's first squad was arranged in 3 rows and 4 lines, standing between the second and third squads in the third row. The searchlights on the breastplates of all the Marines were turned on, and the whole of Valina was shrouded in bright light. There was only one company of Warfield in this wide area, and the other large open areas were still empty. Half an hour later, a Marine Corps with neat steps and strict formations, as if they were participating in a military parade, walked into the open area, stopped opposite Augustus, and stood facing him. Those Marines also belonged to the 33rd Ground Assault Division, and the power armor was painted in the iconic silver gray, but there were no badges or numbers on the armor to indicate which unit they belonged to. The number of troops that suddenly appeared was equivalent to that of a battalion. From the time they entered the battlefield to the time they stood in line, the only sound was the footsteps of power boots on the muddy ground, showing amazing discipline. At first, no one in Augustus's army thought there was anything wrong with this unit, until 0:45 in the morning, when a commander walked up to the soldiers, shouted out his name and rank, and asked the soldiers to take the pre-war oath. As soon as the last word of the order fell, all the soldiers stood at attention at the same time, put down their Gauss rifles on their shoulders, lowered their helmets, and began to take the oath. Their movements were neat and uniform, amazingly consistent, as if they were one whole. We swear here that we have the responsibility to protect the planets and colonies of the Terran Federation, and we regard it as our innate mission. We will fight all enemies of the Federation, whether they come from within or from outer space. We obey all orders from our superiors, just as we obey the arrangements of God. We are Marines, and we are always loyal. We will send all enemies of the Terran Federation to hell until it is filled with wailing souls. We will all die, but this is what we pursue. Our sacrifices for the eternal survival of the Terran Federation. After the oath was completed, all the soldiers closed their helmets at the same time, put their rifles back on their shoulders, and there was no verbal communication between them from beginning to end. What a bunch of pathetic people. A platoon leader suddenly said in the commander channel above the first squad of the first company. Resocialized soldiers? The platoon leader of the second platoon said, so I remember, I have heard of them. These people used to be deserters, political prisoners, murderers or other social scum. These people don't look like criminals, they are more obedient than a group of chickens. The platoon leader of the fourth platoon was a loud voice. Resocialization. Reagan, the platoon leader of the third platoon, seemed to know more. In layman's terms, it's what you call brainwashing. There are many ways, such as stuffing criminals into a container filled with chemicals, or directly cutting open their brains, removing some unnecessary parts of the lobes, and then adding some extra memories to you. Then these resocialized soldiers will become zombies who absolutely obey federal orders. Even if the officers ask these people to jump into the lava lake to take a bath, they will not hesitate at all. Oh my god, this is a crime against humanity, a squad leader exclaimed. Although Augustus did not speak, he was listening carefully. Since entering the boot camp, Augustus has gradually learned some information about resocialized soldiers. The proportion of resocialized soldiers in the 4th Brigade is the lowest in the entire 33rd Ground Assault Division, so the officers in it are not very familiar with this matter. In other units, such as the 1st Brigade and the 2nd Brigade, the proportion of resocialized soldiers in the total number of soldiers has reached 1/5. These soldiers are either organized into independent units, or scattered into various squads and platoons. In order to win this war, the Federation had already sent brainwashed soldiers to the battlefield at this time, and was preparing to replace ordinary independent-minded soldiers with resocialized soldiers. These resocialized soldiers were brave and fearless, and did not know what fear was. The will and skills to fight were engraved into their bodies like instincts, and it only took one operation to transform an ordinary person into a killing machine of the federal government. However, these resocialized soldiers also had a fatal flaw. That is, this transformation actually damaged their brains. While they were deprived of their independent personality, they also lost the ability to think and judge independently. They had to be directly ordered by officers who had not been socialized before they knew what to do. In general, except for this defect, resocialized soldiers were absolutely perfect warriors who could execute all the commander's orders to the maximum extent, and never made mistakes, never feared, and never retreated. Augustus also knew that after the end of the Kel-morian War, the proportion of these resocialized soldiers would continue to increase. By the time of the first full-scale war between humans and alien races, most of the soldiers in the Federal Army had undergone this transformation. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Warfield's company set out on time, heading towards the eastern city of Pox Pride in the silent night, accompanied by 4 brother companies and 2 battalions of resocialized soldiers. On Augustus' HUD display screen, the city was named Dunlin District. Before its fall, Dunlin District had the largest assembly factory for magnetic suspension vehicles and IAA holographic projectors until SYNOPSIS II. These factories were previously the property of the Terra family, the founder family of Tarsinus. According to the offensive deployment, Warfield's first company will be one of the first troops in the Central Force to advance into the city, and 2 other troops will attack from the left and right wings. Before setting off, the Marines turned off the searchlights on their breastplates as ordered and switched the mask display screen to night vision and thermal imaging mode. When they were about to approach the city of Pox Pride and only 2 miles away from the outermost buildings, 2 ARC tanks and a team of 12 fully staffed Goliath armed robots joined Warfield's troops. One of the ARC light tanks was in front of Augustus's class, and 2 huge Goliath robots walked with heavy steps on the right. Since there were always 2 moons in the sky of SYNOPSIS II, the night of this planet was not very dark when the weather was clear. But tonight, the sky of Pox Pride was covered with dark clouds. With all the federal troops turning off the light sources, this army advanced in a pitch black darkness. At 4 AM, when Augustus could see the Goddess Lighthouse, the landmark building in the Dunlin district of Pox Pride, with his naked eyes instead of the focusing camera on his helmet, the Kel-morian defenders in the city fired the first flare. Since the Kel-morian space station and satellite in the synchronous orbit had been destroyed by the Federal fleet. Even if the Kel-morians knew that a large number of Federal troops were approaching from the rear, they could not determine the specific time of their attack. But these Kel-morians obviously stayed up all night. When dozens of flares lit up the sky, the dense artillery fire from the mortar and electromagnetic gun positions had already covered the first resocialized platoon that rushed up. Thanks to Agent Jedi and Agent Rang for the reward. Chapter 39, The Attack on Dunlin. Thousands of feet above the Pride of Pok, the Kel-morian Hellhound fleet and the Terran Federation's Avengers launched a brutal aerial contest. In the central city, anti-aircraft towers and anti-aircraft guns roared. The city was burning, and the flames shot up into the sky, lighting up the night sky. Augustus and the soldiers in his squad followed an AVV arc tank while running and shooting, praying that the electromagnetic shells of the Kel-morian Guild-style large-caliber mortar would not fall on themselves and their comrades. According to the offensive deployment, the 10 battalions of the 2nd and 4th Brigades will be divided into 3 routes to launch an attack from the east of the Pride of Pok, while the 5th Battalion, where Augustus is located, will go straight from the middle route and directly into the heart of the enemy city. The squads are far apart and scattered on a battle line 700 or 800 yards wide. In front of them is a resocialization company charging at full speed, followed by 3 companies of the resocialization battalion, and behind them are the other companies of the 5th Battalion. In the light of the rising flares, Augustus was getting closer and closer to the positions built by the Kel-morians at the entrance of the city with sandbags, steel plates, electrified barbed wire and bunkers. This was obviously only the first line of defense of the enemy. Augustus stepped over the bodies of the resocialized soldiers lying on the ground one after another until he could see the fire from the electromagnetic guns fired at the enemy positions. About 1,000 yards in front of Augustus, there was a Kel-morian hemispherical bunker that had been destroyed by the arc-light tank shells. The positions piled high with sandbags and scrap metal had already been blown to pieces. Even so, the Kel-morian soldiers still held their positions, using their various styles but powerful weapons to fight back against the charging Federal troops. They brought the laser drills in the mines and all other dangerous items they could find in the mines and guilds to the front line. Augustus had to admit that the Kel-morians who grew up in a competitive guild had a much stronger fighting spirit than many of the Federal soldiers who enlisted. They were natural warriors and were willing to sacrifice everything for the glory of the guild and their family. The arc tank continued to move forward, its turret rotating and firing continuously at the Kel-morian position. The Goliath armed robots beside Augustus also opened fire. These 12-foot-tall bipedal walking mechas were like steel giants, and the fine steel shields reflected the cold iron grey light under the illumination of the searchlight. The 30mm automatic machine guns equipped on the double arms on both sides of the Goliath mecha rotated and fired thousands of rounds in a few seconds until the barrels glowed red. Then the missile pods on the shoulders of the Goliath armed robots rotated and opened, firing a series of ground-to-ground missiles, and the fierce firepower made gaps in the Kel-morian position one after another. Augustus and his squad followed the tanks from beginning to end, letting the bullets whiz over his head. Although Warfield's 1st Company was the first to launch the attack, under the order of the company commander, they kept their speed and kept pace with the tanks. Several minutes had passed since they entered the charging distance. During this time, a shell landed on the tank's armor, but was immediately deflected by the armor. Another shell landed next to Augustus, but failed to hurt him. Augustus remained restrained and calm. He moved forward steadily and shot at the bright spot. The soldiers of the 1st squad were scattered not far away, with a distance of 20 yards between each person. The closest to Augustus were Rick, a sniper from the 1st fire team, and Benjamin, who was holding a Honey Whisper a heavy machine gun. After the speed of the 1st Company slowed down, the resocialized soldiers who were still charging at full speed passed the steadily advancing 1st Company one after another. The resocialized soldiers did not have the wolf head emblem of the 33rd Ground Assault Division on their power armor and masks, so Augustus could still tell the difference between them and normal soldiers. There was no doubt that once the commander gave the order to attack, these resocialized soldiers would charge forward consistently, even if they knew they were heading straight into hell. Squad after squad of resocialized soldiers were knocked down by the Kel-morian artillery and bullets in front of Augustus, but more resocialized soldiers continued to rush forward. They charged like robots running according to a fixed program, as if they were born to move forward. After leaving more than 100 bodies behind, the resocialized soldiers boarded the positions deployed by the Kel-morian at the entrance of the city. But they did not stop after that, but continued to move forward at the same speed, and soon disappeared in the distance that Augustus could see. The Kel-morian artillery position finally quieted down, obviously retreating. At this time, Warfield's first company was nearly 200 yards away from the position. Keep moving forward, keep your distance from each other, and keep up with the arc tanks, Warfield said in the commander's channel. Warfield and his orderly charged ahead, and the lieutenant in silver grey power armor was the first to step onto the enemy's position, followed closely by the 1st and 4th platoons. After them, the arc light tank in front of Augustus accelerated, and directly crashed into the temporary position built by the Kel-morians with sandbags, crushing the bloody corpses on the ground, and entering the city through the roads full of craters. But the war did not end there. Augustus realized that the battle in the city was likely to be the most brutal stage. With the fighting spirit of these Kel-morian soldiers, they would probably have to engage in brutal street fighting with them, fighting for the city street by street, building by building, and house by house. Fortunately, compared with the huge area of the city, the Kel-morian garrison was only 20,000 to 30,000 people, and most of the troops were stationed on the north bank of the boundary river Paddock River in the city center. When Augustus followed the tank into the city with tall buildings, it was already dawn, and the sky was still covered with dark clouds. From time to time, a Cerberus or Avenger fighter plane turned into a bright spot of light falling in the air. Several fighter planes with black smoke on their wings pierced into skyscrapers like a sharp sword falling from the sky, or crashed into them, and turned into a ball of fire. In the eyes of Augustus and others, the city seemed grey. The streets were lined with burning Kel-morian chariots. All the windows and doors of the houses were locked, and the windows of the shops on the ground floor of the commercial district were all broken. The goods and tables and chairs were burned in the war, and the walls were dark. The streets became dark because of the weather. The rain had begun to fall, pattering. Gunshots came from other blocks and buildings from time to time. Only an IAA holographic projection advertising robot powered by solar cells was still active in this city that had been abandoned for several years. This small robot with a plastic shell was only 2 feet tall. It walked in front of Augustus on 2 rusty wheels. The holographic projection on its forehead monotonously switched advertisements for magnetic suspension bicycles and goddess statue attractions. Sir, welcome to the beautiful pride of Poke. I will only take a few seconds of your time. Please allow me to introduce you to the Terra 55 commercial magnetic levitation motorcycle. Before the IAA robot could finish his speech, Benjamin, the heavy machine gunner next to Augustus, kicked him away like a bull, because none of them could be sure whether the insidious and cunning Kel-morians had installed a time bomb in the small body of this robot. Chapter 40. Moving along the street. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the front resocialization battalion had advanced several miles toward the center of the city and lost contact with other troops in the rear. After entering the city, Warfield's first company chose to join several brother companies behind and then lead the advance. Augustus's squad followed an arc-light tank beside him along an east-west 4-lane highway numbered 30, entering the city from the Dunlin City area in the northeast of Poke's Pride, and then heading west to the command center and orbital satellite communication base station in the center of the Kel-morian controlled area. It was drizzling in the rainy season in the northern hemisphere of Telesis II. A layer of white steam covered the cooling tower behind Augustus' power armor. The rain slid down the upper edge of his mask, and the devastated streets gradually became hazy. Thanks to the resocialization of soldiers, Warfield's troops did not encounter resistance from the Kel-morians while marching on the highway. Only the destroyed roadblocks and the bodies of resocialized soldiers and Kel-morians could reveal what kind of tragic battle had taken place here. With every mile forward, there were more bodies on the road. Rainwater mixed with blood flowed into the unblocked sewers, and some rodent-like creatures drilled into the broken helmet visors and gnawed on human corpses. By paying attention to the number of corpses of resocialized soldiers, Augustus knew that the resocialized battalion that was still charging had lost most of them. Augustus's squad did not encounter any organized Kel-morian troops along the way, and tanks could provide them with cover in open areas. Only some Kel-morian labor auxiliary troops hiding in houses, sewers, and garbage cans suddenly rushed out of their hiding places, tied with explosives and electromagnetic grenades, trying to die together with the tanks of the Federal Army. The road had a wide view, and these Kel-morian soldiers without armor on their bodies were shot by Federal soldiers as soon as they showed their heads. Among them, Rick Kidd, a sniper in Augustus's squad, had the highest number of kills. His shooting was accurate and deadly, and every shot hit the head. The powerful Boatswain sniper rifle was enough to lift the enemy's skull just by brushing the enemy's scalp. The good luck ended when they were only about 3 miles away from the city center. Since there were a large number of artificially dug canals in the urban area of Poker Pride, there were rivers blocking each urban area. On the way out of Dunlin City and into the main urban area, the Federal Army had to cross dozens of different bridges. Most of the bridges had collapsed, and the traces of human destruction were clearly visible. Only the giant Goliath-armed robots could wade through the artificial canals during the flood season. There were fewer and fewer roads left for the Federal Army. When crossing the last Cross River Bridge in Dunlin District, the disaster occurred. At that time, a platoon of Federal Marines and an arc tank were walking on this white bridge that had not been detected, heading into the distance. Augustus's squad was only 800 yards from the bridge, and at their speed they would be on it in less than a minute. Suddenly, with a bang, the ground seemed to shift 5 inches, and the thunderous explosion could be heard for miles. Augustus's first feeling was that someone had slapped his ears, and amid the humming, the wreckage of the middle section of a bridge flew up in front of him, accompanied by twisted bodies, steel, and blood raining down on the water. The shock wave lifted a wall of earth, and the squad closest to the bridge crashed directly into the once extremely dense, horizontal air wall. Even the power armor twisted like a pinched can, and more than 20 people flew sideways like flies that were swatted away. This bridge with gods carved on the white jade railings was once a masterpiece of architects and artists, but now it has become a tomb of death. You idiots, why don't you wait for the bomb disposal soldiers? The one who shouted was the commander of the 5th Battalion. He did not use the communication channel, but took off his mask and yelled at the Marines who were about to go up the bridge. Augustus did not know which unit was on the bridge, but it was not necessarily the people from the 1st Company. Warfield's order with a buzzing sound in the command channel showed that he and the 2nd Platoon were the first to board the bridge and cross the river safely. The explosive device obviously used a time fuse instead of other trigger modes. Augustus naturally fell behind because he had to lead his squad to protect the tanks, but he didn't expect to escape. That's good. We have to wait for a long time before we can pass here, Josephine said gloatingly. He had no enthusiasm for war. Unlike Warfield, who had to go to the front line of the war and go deep into the most dangerous areas, Josephine believed in hiding as much as possible and never being the first to stand out. This is not good news. Augustus's tinnitus had gotten better by then, and he was far less optimistic than Josephine. I've seen before. There's more than one way to cross the river. Of course, this is the closest road to the Kel-morian command center marked on the satellite map, and it's also the only road that can be used by convoys and tanks. We can still take a detour, but we can only take a small road, passing through the residential areas and commercial streets beside the road to the other side of the river. Believe me, Josephine, this is much more dangerous than the wide road. Augustus is right. On the road, at least there are tanks following us, and there won't be any Kel-morian bastards who suddenly appear. Ward talked a lot more than others during combat, and he would enter a state of excitement like an angel of revenge the moment he saw the Kel-morian people. This is too bad. Omo lamented. The real trouble is coming. Augustus reminded his soldiers, just like I said before the battle, if someone is knocked down, we must bring him back no matter what. So far, Augustus's squad has not suffered any casualties. But now Augustus would most likely have to lead his soldiers into danger. As Augustus guessed, in the absence of Warfield, the commander of the 5th Battalion, a hawk-nosed lieutenant colonel, took over the command of Augustus' platoon and ordered them to go north through a deserted commercial area and detour to another bridge to cross the river. Reagan, the leader of the 3rd platoon, had already crossed the river with Warfield, so the commander of the 1st squad became the commander of the 4th company. The tanks could no longer go deep into the narrow and load-bearing residential roads, so Augustus could only bite the bullet and lead his squad to follow the 4th company into a commercial street that was much narrower and longer than the highway. This street was between the 3 offensive routes of the 4th Brigade, and no troops had ever gone deep into it, which also meant that there were probably Kel-morian soldiers hiding in it who had retreated here. Since there were 2 battalions following the 5th Battalion, it was impossible for thousands of Marines to just walk slowly through one commercial street after another, so most of them chose a street as a platoon, and detoured according to the battalion commander's order. Augustus followed 2 squads of the 4th Company of the 5th Battalion into a commercial street, numbered A220. Benjamin, the heavy machine gunner of the 1st Fire Group, and Omo, the deputy carrying a box of ammunition, followed closely, followed by Renault and Hanik's 2nd Fire Group. Thanks to Xinghuan 1 for the reward, and thanks to Rangayo Changzi, Xingyuan, Zerestad, and Maya Shapeo for the monthly tickets. Unevening news, the Rakashil ritual has failed, and the pigeons have been pushed into the ascension pit. Chapter 41 Barricade. The A220 commercial street are 2 rows of 10 to 20 story buildings. From the dilapidated billboards, it can be seen that the main business scope of the shops on the 1st floor of these high-rise buildings includes restaurants, high-end bars, clothing, etc., and the others are banks and hotels. The street is about 60 feet wide, and the ground is paved with marble tiles. On both sides of the road, paralyzed cleaning robots and overturned garbage trucks can be seen everywhere. This north-south commercial street has a safe passage leading to other commercial streets every few hundred yards. In fact, all the streets in this commercial area are connected. The entire commercial area is composed of rows of neatly arranged high-rise buildings, and there is a commercial street between every 2 rows of buildings. Relatively speaking, each commercial street is only 1 building away from the adjacent one, just like walking from the front door of a bar to the back door. The 2 squads in front directly passed the first safe passage to the east, but because there might be Kel-morian soldiers hiding in the shops and passages on both sides, Augustus took a quick look as he passed by. Then he stopped immediately, raised his Gauss rifle, and aimed it at the passage that was dim due to the lack of light and sunlight, and turned on the power armor and the searchlight on the rifle. Stop. Benjamin, Renault and others behind him were puzzled, but they did it immediately. However, when everyone else stopped steadily and stood firm, only Omo behind Benjamin failed to stop, and bumped into Benjamin's back with a clang. "You idiot." Benjamin turned around and glared at him. This kid just reacts a little slowly. He has been like this since he was a child. Renault came up and helped Omo stand firm. Then Renault and others followed Augustus into the safe passage. Because of the night vision function of the HUD display on the mask and the light of the searchlight, the vision of the Marines was not limited by the dimness. Although this was unusual, as they saw, there were 6 Marines standing steadily in the middle of the safe passage. When they saw Augustus and others coming, they didn't say anything, but just turned around and looked at him, as if they had lost their souls. Under the skirt of the Virgin Mary, Benjamin sighed, "There are a group of deserters here. Why don't we hide here too?" Josephine said shockingly. "Who is your commander?" Augustus observed these Marines, and found that they did not have the wolf head emblem of the 33rd Ground Assault Division on their shoulders and chest armor. This was exactly the difference in appearance between the resocialized soldiers and ordinary soldiers that he had observed before. Combined with the current situation, Augustus seemed to understand something. This is probably a group of resocialized soldiers without any command. Without receiving any instructions, they stayed in place like robots in standby mode. "I'm Sergeant Augustus Mengsk. You can confirm this identity in the ID identity search bar in the Mecha's built-in computer." As he said, Augustus lowered his mask so that the Marines could see his face clearly. One of the Marines stared at Augustus' face for a few seconds and gave a beautiful and perfectly regulated military salute before speaking through the helmet's external speaker. "Sir, our commander is Lieutenant Jennard." "Where is Lieutenant Jennard?" Augustus asked. "He died." The Marine hesitated, as if such a thing went against his basic understanding. So, in the case of losing the commander, should the soldiers obey the command of the current and only officer? Augustus calmly induced the Marine to make the answer he wanted. This. The Marine hesitated, and he thought for at least 10 seconds, causing the impatient Hannick behind Augustus to mutter impatiently, "Yes, sir, the 312th Battalion, 1st Company, 4th Platoon, 2nd Squad, requests your command." "Very good. Your name, rank, and position?" Augustus smiled. "Sir, answer the question." "Lead, Private 1st Class." The Marine stood still and said, "Private Laird, I order you to lead the 2nd Squad to follow me, and be ready to obey my next order at any time." "Yes, sir." The Marines saluted in unison. "Let's go." Augustus waved his hand, and walked out of the safe passage with the astonished Renault and others. Augustus's squad continued to move along the commercial street, and they soon caught up with the two squads in front. This was not because Augustus was eager to catch up with the people in front, but simply because the troops in front encountered a barricade that blocked the entire street and could not move forward. In the same style as the random splicing of the Kel-morian, this barricade was made of 2 double-decker buses, concrete blocks and other waste materials. These discarded materials and steel plates blocked the already narrow street. The lights of the 2 buses were still on, and the engines were humming. It seemed that this barricade had just been built a few hours after the Federal Army entered the city of Pox Pride. About 10 Kel-morian soldiers were hiding behind the barricades and firing at the Federal troops. Most of them were ordinary labor auxiliaries. The electromagnetic guns in their hands were not as powerful as the Federal E-Series and C-Series electromagnetic rifles, but some Kel-morian soldiers were holding grenade launchers and RPG rocket launchers. Augustus saw a charging Marine being hit by a grenade and his entire lower leg was blown off. He fell to the ground and rolled in pain. The 2 squads in front were suppressed by the fierce firepower and could only retreat, leaving behind a few corpses and a wounded man who was wailing for help. So, about 600 yards away from the barricade, Augustus ran into the 2 retreating squads. "You've come just in time." The squad leader of one of the squads breathed a sigh of relief after seeing Augustus. He pointed to the barricade in front and said, "I'm Corporal Hop. Maybe we can take it together. I don't think there's any need to make greater sacrifices." Augustus looked forward, and the rangefinder built into the armor was calculating the distance between him and the barricade. "This defensive position is meaningless, because the entire street is connected. And since this road is blocked, we can go from another street, such as A219 on the left and A221 Commercial Street on the right." Hop was speechless for a moment. "What you said makes sense." Hop pondered for 2 seconds. "But what about those Kel-morians?" Although he didn't know Augustus, the corporal inexplicably felt that he must have the answer to this question. "This is my plan," Augustus said. "You and your people will make a feint attack in the front, and my squad will go around to attack them from behind." "How to feint? We have already lost a lot of people," the corporal asked. "You just need to show your face a few hundred yards away and keep firing to attract their attention," Augustus said. "Do you have any other questions?" Hop shrugged. "You have the final say, sir." Since the Federal Marines armor does not have rank insignia, and Augustus's men include several resocialized soldiers, it can be seen at a glance that there are many more than a full-strength squad. In addition, the other party's momentum and confident tone really shocked him, so he naturally thought that Augustus was a lieutenant. "I'm not a sir. Like you, I'm also a corporal," Augustus said. Renault, Hannick and others sneered in the communication channel. After Augustus finished speaking, he led the squad and the resocialized soldiers into a department store next door, walked through the lobby, and entered the A221 Commercial Street from the other side of the building. Correction of a run fake news. When I didn't say it, I received a popular web page push in the afternoon and thought I failed to advance. In the middle of the night, a new book selection app came. Fuck. I'm shallow, thanks to the editor. Maybe I've read enough, but the daily increase in my collection is really disappointing. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42 Goliath Armed Robot. Augustus was still the first to rush to the front. When he led his squad forward, Augustus counted the number of shops he passed and estimated the distance as he advanced. After the pedometer on the HUD screen showed that he had run about 700 yards, he walked into a fashionable clothing store on the left, walked straight through the counters and collapsed hangars, and came to the storefront facing the A220 Commercial Street. At this time, looking back at the A220 Commercial Street from the direction he came from, Augustus could see that behind the barricade, a dozen Kel-morian soldiers were facing away from them and shooting at the front with full concentration. Hanak, follow me closely. Zander, prepare grenades. The second fire team will switch to grenades and use grenades to eliminate the Kel-morian rippers. Augustus said, Rick, kill the one who is responsible for giving orders. Lerid, you and your men will start charging immediately after I give the order. Do you understand? Understood. A response came from the channel. Just wait and see, boss. Yes, sir. Follow me. In a few breaths, Augustus was the first to walk out of the store and onto the street of A220 Commercial Street, followed by 18 fully armed Marines. At this time, Augustus was only 100 yards away from the Kel-morian barricade. The sound of his power boots stepping on the brick floor was still very different from the sound of the electromagnetic gun, which immediately attracted the attention of the enemy. In panic, these people immediately turned around and fired at Augustus's troops, but it was too late. Zander, Augustus shouted. With the power of the power armor servo system, Zander threw two C-54 electromagnetic grenades in succession onto the barricade 80 yards away from him. The blue pulse emitted by the grenade detonation instantly blew away several Kel-morian labor auxiliary soldiers, and minced meat and blood fell on their comrades like rain. In the first round of volleys fired by Augustus and others with Gauss rifles, all the labor auxiliary army soldiers without power armor fell down, leaving only 2 rippers wearing black power armor to fight back. The bullets clanged against Augustus' armor, but it only added more scars on the surface of the armor that did not need to be repaired. With a loud bang, a grenade fired by Raynor hit the abdominal armor of one of the rippers. The grenade exploded against the abdominal armor and instantly tore through the fine steel armor. The hot and twisted metal burned and crushed the ripper's stomach. Sniper Rick fired almost at the same time, and a white mark appeared on the helmet of the last ripper, but the impact of the bullet still made him stagger. The second bullet from the boatswain sniper rifle penetrated the helmet, ending his pain in an instant. A labor auxiliary army soldier whose legs were blown off by a grenade fell to the ground screaming and wailing, and blood could not stop flowing from the wound. The blood loss would take his life in a few minutes. Augustus walked in front of him, frowning at the heart-wrenching wailing and hateful look. Then, he shot through the chest of the Kel-morian soldier. A huge and hideous wound appeared, and the wailing stopped abruptly. The battle was over in a very short time, and many of Augustus's previous arrangements were not used in time. Then the previous Corporal Hope also came with his soldiers to join Augustus. Keep going, Augustus said to him. I listen to you, the corporal said. So, gradually, the troops led by Augustus had exceeded 40 people, almost catching up with the recruit platoon during the boot camp. Augustus led this mixed force to continue to move north along A220 Commercial Street. He estimated that there were a large number of Kel-morian troops hidden in this commercial district, because only 2 minutes later they collided head-on with a Ripper unit. A Kel-morian Ripper team that was also running fast on the street almost appeared out of nowhere. The number of people in this Ripper team is about the same as a full squad of the Federation Marine Corps, all wearing black CMC power armor. At a distance of about 200 yards, the Rippers who met on the narrow road and the Federation army began to shoot at each other. They neither sought cover nor lay down to avoid bullets, just like 2 teams of line infantry shooting at each other with muskets in the 17th century on medieval Earth. When the 2 teams of soldiers wearing power armor stood on the street and shot at each other, any shooting skills and tactics were irrelevant. The only thing to compete was whose armor was stronger and who could stand steadily before the other fell. The bullet bounced off Augustus's breastplate, and the clanging sound of the collision and the death that could come at any time made his adrenaline in his body rise greatly. The ammunition capacity displayed on the HUD display on Augustus's helmet mask dropped from 360 at the beginning to 0 in a few seconds. When he was changing bullets, 2 of his own men fell down, and 5 or 6 Kel-morian Rippers were lying down. The Rippers did not retreat. The remaining ones continued to reload at the same frequency as Augustus, then fired and fell silently. Augustus could not imagine what kind of faces were behind those black masks. So far, he had never seen any Kel-morian retreat or surrender. Report the number of casualties. Augustus naturally took over as the commander of this mixed force, and the other 2 squads seemed happy to follow his command. One person from the 4th squad in the 5th squad of the 3rd platoon of the 5th company was killed. Corporal Hope sighed. Augustus looked around and confirmed that no wounded were left behind. Go and see if there are any survivors among those Kel-morian people, Augustus said to them. Almost none of the Kel-morian Rippers who fell to the ground died because their armor was directly penetrated by bullets. Most of the spikes that killed them were shot into the armor from the seams after rebounding on the ram armor. As long as the rebounding bullet was at the right angle, it was enough to kill a person. After counting the number of people, Augustus walked over the bodies of the Rippers and continued to move forward. According to the satellite map, Augustus's troops were only 500 yards away from the exit of a 220 Commercial Street. As long as they walked out of this street, they could walk on an east-west road again and join other troops. But when Augustus and others were getting closer and closer to the exit and could already see the light at the exit, a huge shadow suddenly rose from their left. On Augustus' left was a building more than 40 stories high. Under the building was a private parking lot, which was connected to the underground through a steep slope. The entrance of this parking lot was obviously widened with explosives. At first it was just a black dot, but soon, 2 rows of rising missile launchers appeared in front of Augustus, followed by a T-shaped cockpit that looked like a Kel-morian tractor head. It was a Kel-morian Goliath armed robot, a bipedal walking mecha made of steel. Left. Goliath. At the same time, the Marines who reacted immediately turned their guns to shoot, but Goliath fired before them. Before he walked out of the parking lot and onto the street, the 2 35mm cannons of the Goliath mecha swept across the entire street, and the barrels rotated at a frightening speed. The flames from the barrels of the cannons were 1 meter long, and the bullets caused 2 rows of craters on the ground that extended forward at a very fast speed. At least 3 people in Augustus's army were swept down, and he had no time to think about whether there were people from his class among them. Thanks to Command and Agent Rangrang for their awards, and to Starring 1, naming difficulty, I'm doing homework, Agent Rangrang, the pretentious clown, the Knight of Light and Shadow, Command and Book Famine number 01 for their monthly tickets. Thank you for your support. Chapter 43 The suicide note is in my shirt pocket. The Goliath that Augustus encountered was about 15 feet tall. The design concept of comprehensively improving the caliber and ammunition load was reflected in every aspect of the Kel-morian Goliath mecha. Compared with the Goliath mecha copied by the Terran Federation, the Kel-morian Goliath looked much rougher. Some traces of modification using civilian mining mecha parts could be seen on these mechas. The blue and green paint was extremely chaotic, with no regular lines and patterns, as if the 2 colors of paint were simply splashed on the armor surface of the mecha. A tattered flag was inserted behind the cockpit, and the kilometer logo on it was blurred. But it is undeniable that the Kel-morian was actually the designer and developer of this powerful all-terrain ground firepower and air defense support walking mecha. Their Goliath was also more dangerous than the modularized Federal model produced on the assembly line. At this time, the Goliath mecha was only 11 or 12 yards away from Augustus and others. The huge Kel-morian Goliath walking mecha walked down the slope step by step onto the A220 Commercial Street. The shoulder-mounted machine gun swept towards the unsuspecting Federal Marines at a very close distance as the upper cockpit turned left and right. In the blink of an eye, 2 more Marines were hit. The dense spike bullets of the Federal Marines could only make a white mark like raindrops on the armor plate and the cockpit glass, but it was far from enough to injure the steel giant. Wood, aim the rocket at the cockpit, Augustus said in the communication channel. Grenade. At the same time, Wood, who had completed the aiming, fired the first rocket through the individual rocket launcher on his shoulder. The rocket, which can automatically aim and track heat sources and electromagnetic signals, accurately hit the cockpit of the Goliath. An electromagnetic grenade flew out from the top of Augustus's helmet. An electromagnetic pulse wave with a diameter of about 20 feet spread out at the slope entrance of the parking lot like a ripple caused by a drop of water falling into the water. The overflowing electric current seemed like a wandering thundersnake. The chaotic electrical pulses caused a group of snowflake-like garbled characters to temporarily appear on Augustus's mask display screen, but it returned to normal in less than a second. The electromagnetic pulse generated by the grenade caused Goliath to tilt backwards at a considerable angle and fall on his back. Augustus and several marines around him immediately ran towards the fallen Goliath. After a few irregular breaths, he slung his Gauss rifle across his back and climbed to the cockpit of the Mecha through the climbing frame outside the Goliath's cockpit. At this time, the tempered glass of the cockpit had been shattered by the rocket. The cockpit was very small and could barely accommodate one person sitting inside. The old leather seat was directly removed from a scrap tractor. On an inner arc-shaped console were a bunch of messy buttons and display panels of different sizes. Augustus held the driver's neck with one hand. With the hum of the servo system of the power armor, a bald Kel-morian man with a black single-eye mask was carried out by Augustus. The bald man's face was covered with scars left by the wind and sun exposure of adventurers, and his slightly obese body was covered with blood from being pierced by rocket shrapnel and glass fragments. With a bang, the Mecha pilot was thrown to the ground by Augustus, and then he jumped down and stood in the shadow of the Goliath Mecha. Omo and Benjamin were hit. In the communication channel, Xander said in a trembling voice, "Damn it, that bastard aimed at our machine gunner. You bastard." Hearing this, Renault rushed up and grabbed the driver, raised his Gauss rifle, and pointed the muzzle at his nose. "I swear I will make you regret coming into this world." In Renault's hometown, Charlotte-Centerville, the Omo family and the Renault family are neighbors, and their parents are friends who have known each other for many years. The relationship between Omo and Renault, who grew up together, is as good as that of brothers. "Leave him to me." Augustus walked to Renault's side. Renault looked at Augustus. "Augustus, let me finish him off." I said, "Leave him to me." Augustus repeated, and no one could see the expression behind his mask. Augustus took the driver from Renault's hand, grabbed his collar with both hands, and raised him up until his eyes were level with his own. Perhaps he didn't even have the strength to raise his head. The driver's head was hanging down, but he was still panting. "How many Goliaths are there on this street, in this area, and how many people are ambushing here?" Augustus pulled the driver's face in front of him. "What do you want to know?" "Huh?" The Goliath driver struggled to raise his weather-beaten face, trembling and cracking his mouth, revealing 2 rows of teeth soaked in blood. "The only thing I know, cough cough, is that you are a worthless federal beast." The driver couldn't continue speaking, and Augustus threw him to the ground and stepped on his chest that was heaving violently. Augustus took off the Gauss rifle from his back, held the barrel and magazine with both hands, and raised it high. Under the powerful power provided by the servo system, he aimed at his head and swung it hard. It was like swinging an axe, and blood splattered in an instant. Augustus. Renault next to him stretched out a hand to Augustus, but quickly put it down. It was not until today that he realized one thing, that Augustus, who had always been gentle, could also be as angry as thunder. Augustus took it back at the same speed as he swung it, holding the blood-stained rifle, and walked back. No one noticed that the Goliath driver was slowly opening his right hand and there was a plastic-sealed 2-inch photo of a laughing baby on it. When Augustus returned to his subordinates, the communication channel was in chaos, and Runstein was injecting sedatives and painkillers into Omo. "Benjamin is dead." Amy Brandon knelt beside Benjamin, who was lying on the ground, holding his head with both hands. Augustus felt his heartbeat stop for a few seconds, and he walked straight to Benjamin lying on the ground. Benjamin's power armor was one size larger than Augustus's. On his chest armor with a white cross, there were 3 holes about 2 inches wide, one of which was right above his heart. Perhaps for Benjamin, the pain was probably just a moment. After the machine gun bullet penetrated his chest, his entire heart was crushed by the high-speed rotation of the bullet, and then stopped beating forever. Benjamin's eyes were closed, and no expression could be seen on his face, as if he was just sleeping. Augustus was silent, reflecting this scene in his heart, and vowed that he would never forget it. Report the casualties. Augustus retracted his gaze and walked towards Omo, who was not far from him. There is 1 person killed and 1 injured in the 4th squad of the 3rd platoon of the 5th company. Corporal Hope cursed again. There are no injured now. 2 people were killed in the 2nd squad of the 4th platoon of the 1st company. Private First Class Lay Reed said. Augustus knelt on one knee beside Omo, who was lying on the ground. Omo's helmet had been opened by Runstein, and an M2 backpack made of waterproof canvas was covering his punctured abdominal armor. The young man's eyes were fixed on the sky, his mouth opened and closed, trying his best to inhale air into his lungs, and making coughs that sounded like thick phlegm. Blood was flowing into his lungs with every forceful breath. One of his lungs was pierced. Tom, good boy, don't be afraid, it's no big deal. Augustus's helmet mask slowly moved up, so that Omo could see his face. You will be saved. Squad leader. Omo's voice was hoarse. The suicide note is in my shirt pocket. I told you, it will come in handy. Thanks to long yelling, Zun Sheo, book friend 201908292216174116. See you Isaiah and Fen Kiang, Wandering Demon, Yuan Deoxing, and Sakura Wumui for their monthly tickets, and thanks to Sakura Wumui and Commandlush for their awards. Chapter 44. You must be ruthless. Raynor's tears were about to fall. It's just a minor injury. Augustus felt something blocking his throat, making it hurt slightly. We have to do something for Tom. Raynor said, we have to take him and Benjamin. Before Augustus made a decision, another federal army gradually caught up behind them. They were about a platoon, led by a lieutenant, and judging from the number, they should be the troops of the 2nd Brigade. Who is your commander? The lieutenant walked in front of Augustus, and his troops also stopped. The lieutenant obviously noticed the Goliath walker that fell to the side. I'm Corporal Mengsk. In any case, you can see that a medic is needed here, and the sooner the better. Augustus stood up and said to the lieutenant, now you can tell me the situation here, and it's best to summarize it concisely in 1 or 2 sentences. After pausing for 2 seconds and saying a few words in the communication channel, the lieutenant said, a Kel-morian Goliath attacked us from the underground parking lot in the alley. Augustus said, as you can see, we killed it. Were you in command of these people? Well done. The lieutenant glanced at the Goliath and said, the Kel-morian Goliaths caused us far more losses than their rippers. No matter how much loss and sacrifice we made, it was worth it. Take your men and follow me. We still have a long way to go to take down the Kel-morian command center. The Kel-morian bastards are hiding everywhere in this city, like rats in the sewers. Too many people have died to retake this ruin, to seize this damn stinking ditch. He said, we can only go down this path, young sergeant. This is the fucking war. While Augustus was reporting to the lieutenant, 4 medics came out of the company with stretchers. They used laser components to remove Omo's chest and abdominal armor, and took a few minutes to remove other parts. After a simple bandage, they carried the unconscious Omo onto a stretcher and walked in the direction they came from. As they left, the medics dropped off a few more body bags. These bags are made with the latest nanotextile technology and can preserve the body before recycling. A soft emotionless female voice came through the loudspeaker. Recycle? What to recycle? Raynor put away the body bag. Power armor. The medic said. What's his injury? Where are you going? Xander asked after the stretcher. But the medics just shook their heads and didn't answer. After putting Benjamin and the other dead Marines' bodies into the body bags, Augustus led the rest of the group to catch up with the lieutenant's team. No one spoke during this period. Everyone was in a bad mood, especially Raynor. For a while, he was shaking with sadness. Grief and self-blame were also tormenting Augustus, but this was not enough to defeat him. On the contrary, the pain made his mind clearer and more meticulous than ever before. Gradually, they were getting closer and closer to the exit of a 220 commercial street. The exit was a central square composed of large buildings such as a bookstore, an electronics mall, and a department store. In the center of the cobblestone square was a dried up fountain. As long as they crossed this square, Augustus and others could get back to the road. At this time, the bright light was getting closer and closer to them. In the surrounding streets, The sound of gunfire and artillery became more and more intense. Every federal force entering the commercial district was ambushed by the Kel-morians. The lieutenant of the 2nd Brigade walked in front and was the first to step out of the commercial street. At the exit, the officer waved his hands vigorously and turned around to continue moving forward. "Don't stop," he shouted loudly. But suddenly, without warning, the officer stumbled a few steps and fell to the ground. Almost everyone saw the lieutenant fall. From Augustus' position, he could just see the bullet hole on his helmet. "Sniper!" a non-commissioned officer in the lieutenant's platoon shouted, which triggered a series of chain reactions. Because they didn't know where the sniper was, the Marines fired at the surrounding shops and high-rise buildings. After breaking the few dozen remaining windows in the area, the gunfire stopped. "Rick, can we kill him?" Augustus asked in the communication channel. "Yes, but we must determine the location of the enemy sniper." Rick replied, "See those tall buildings in the square? He may be on any floor of any of them, with his gun pointed at the entrance of this street. He may have left there long ago, or he is still quietly waiting for the next target worthy of his shooting. The shot just now may be just the last shot. He just needs to let us know that there is a killer staring at our heads." While Augustus was talking to Rick, the squad leaders under the lieutenant were discussing fiercely in the channel of their own platoon, but they were arguing more about who would command the platoon after the lieutenant died. "We can only rush over with all our strength," Hannock said. "If we don't get rid of that sniper, we will lose as many people as he can shoot before we rush out of this street." Raynor said, "How about going around to other streets?" Xander said, "Or we wait for the troops on other streets to get out first." "But what if that bastard has already set his sights on us? As long as he stays there, who knows if his next shot will hit one of our people among the hundreds of people," Ward said. "Rick, how can we determine the position of the enemy sniper?" Augustus asked. "I need him to shoot again." Rick had climbed to the top floor of a department store at the exit of the commercial street. He set up his sniper rifle at a window on the top floor and aimed at the central square. The crosser moved slowly from left to right at a distance of half an inch per second. Rick's sniper rifle is designed for warriors wearing power armor and is born for sniping. The trigger of the boatswain's FN-92 is designed for a two-step trigger mode. After the first step is pulled, the second trigger only needs a slight touch to make the firing pin and the barrel bounce up. After hearing Rick's words, Augustus was silent. The most rational thinking told him that they couldn't stay in this commercial district for too long. Otherwise, who knows if a Ripper troop or a Goliath will suddenly appear next to them. Led. While the squad leaders were still arguing, Augustus suddenly turned to the resocialized soldiers he had met before. Now, there were 3 of them left. Without any hesitation or delay, Augustus chose what he thought was the most effective way to solve the problem at the moment. He wanted these resocialized soldiers to attract enemy snipers to shoot. Benjamin's death and Omo's serious injury were making Augustus cold. Laird immediately walked to Augustus' side. "Rick, you have 3 chances," Augustus said. "One is enough." Rick said, "What are you going to do?" "You can try to induce him to shoot, but don't take too many risks. From now on, Rick, concentrate on finding the location of the sniper and kill him before he escapes." Augustus cut off the communication channel after he finished speaking. "Private First Class Laird, come here." At this time, Augustus was very close to Laird, and he found a string of ID numbers in very small fonts on the helmet of this resocialized soldier. After entering this number, Augustus found the following information through the built-in computer. Laird Gain killed 10 adult men, ate 6 of them, and salted the rest. Chapter 45 How Fortress. "This is my order to you, Laird." Augustus pointed to the exit of a 220 commercial street. "Go in that direction. Move forward." "Yes, sir." Laird gave a model military salute, turned and ran towards the exit. Augustus watched Laird pass through the first few squads. Amid their astonishment and shouting, the Marine who was transformed from a murderer into a resocial soldier stepped out of the entrance with a steady pace. "Get ready, Rick." "Understood, Mengsk. With my sniper badge, I can't miss." Rick had held the sniper rifle tightly. The built-in computer in the armor was calculating the temperature, humidity, altitude, and air pressure for it on the display screen in the eyepiece, and it could also help him calibrate the height and deflection difference. In the time of a heartbeat, Rick pulled the first trigger. At this time, the sound of the outside world, everything seemed to be isolated from it. Now, he had to pay attention to the flash of fire when the sniper rifle on the opposite high-rise building was fired, and then catch the sniper and kill him before he retreated and changed the sniper point again. After Rick focused all his energy on the crosses of the scope, a very light golden color appeared in his wide open eyes, which was one of the characteristics of a psychic when activating psychic power. Stronger human psychics can make their eyes surge with the color of molten gold when using psychic power. At this moment, the rain fell slower. In Rick's world, the flow of time slowed down, as if he was in another deceleration space overlapping with the real world. This made it easier for Rick to seize the opportunity to sniper. With just a slight tremor of his fingers, he could open the skull of every target. So far, Rick has never missed, except when he was interrupted by irresistible external factors. At a certain moment, Rick caught a fleeting flash on an electronic building opposite. In less than a breath, he locked the target. Before the sniper in the hooded grey robe pulled away, the flow of time returned to normal with a heavy collision between the butt of the gun and the shoulder armor. A sense of satisfaction and accomplishment arose spontaneously, a feeling that Rick had never experienced in the 18 years he had grown up as the heir of the Bennett family. The joy of sniping fascinated Rick, and was gradually turning him into a skilled and ruthless killer. Rick had accepted his new position, and was satisfied with it. I killed him. I will continue to monitor there when you pass through this square. Rick quickly left his original position. Good, Augustus replied on the other side of the communication channel. As Rick set up his sniper rifle on another floor, he could see a team of soldiers in silver grey power armor running across the central square from his eyepiece, watching the last of them pass through the square entrance and enter the wider Highway 40. Suddenly, Rick began to think about such a question, how Augustus made the sniper shoot so decisively. But soon he put the question behind him. In Rick's mind, there was nothing that Augustus could not do. After Augustus's troops set foot on Highway 40, they gradually joined the companies of the 5th Battalion and other battalions. On this highway, the Federal Army only encountered a small number of Kel-morian troops and a few tanks. Kel-morian tanks are not tanks, but rather tracked heavy armored vehicles converted from mining tractors. These tanks converted from tractors are welded with pre-steel plates, and the steel plates of the skirt armor and the front fenders of the tracks are full of sharp spikes. The styles of turrets are also varied, with different calibers. Some Kel-morian tanks are even equipped with 2 main guns in front and behind, but the turrets cannot move. The tractor engine is cooled by an external water tank. When the engine makes a sound like a giant roaring, bursts of steam will rise from the hood of the tank. The combat style of these Kel-morian tanks is also extremely wild. Crazy tank drivers are more willing to drive tanks, to rush towards the Federal Marines when there are still a lot of shells left, crushing them to death. However, a small number of tanks were not enough to defeat the Federation army, and these tanks were quickly destroyed by the Federation's anti-tank weapons. The road to the city center was unobstructed, and Augustus's troops followed other companies all the way west. At the same time, the Federation's offensive forces in different directions had already entered the city, and the fortresses and defensive positions built by the Kel-morians around the command center, satellite communication base stations and heavy factories were also conquered one after another. The fleet battle in the synchronous orbit of Telesis II also came to an end. Under the attack of nearly 10 Leviathan and Behemoth-class battlecruisers of the Alpha and Delta squadrons, as well as their huge fleet composed of assault ships and frigates, the last 3 Kel-morians battlecruisers folded out of the synchronous orbit. In deep space, the wreckage of the battleship fell into eternal silence after burning out the last trace of oxygen in it. Thousands of fragmented steel fragments revolved around the planet, and each crushed, molten cabin and deck became a cold tomb burying dozens or hundreds of souls. Lacking fleet and air support, the armies closest to Poker's Pride were also engaged in battle with the Federation, and by 1400 hours, even the toughest war supervisors at the Kel-morian Command Center believed they were doomed. When Augustus's squad arrived in the city center, the few remaining Kel-morian troops began to surrender to the Federation forces under the orders of their commander. At 1700 hours, the last Kel-morian unit that was still holding out was defeated by the Federation. The 5th Battalion of the 4th Brigade assembled on a helipad at the Kel-morian Command Center, and then Augustus and the worried-looking Raynor and others sat on the helipad waiting for the arrival of the transport plane. At 1900 hours, a heavy Apod transport carrying Augustus's squad flew over the Paddock River back to the 5th Battalion's base. As soon as they got off the transport plane, a second sergeant at the camp called Augustus to tell him that Omo had been in poor condition since he was sent to the Marine Corps hospital in Poker's Pride. Augustus immediately boarded the supply vehicle from the 5th Battalion to the hospital with Raynor. Along the way, he was unusually tired and silent. Raynor showed much more sorrow and pain than Augustus. He didn't even know how to mention this to his family and Omo's parents. Even if Omo survived, he would probably have to rely on artificial organs and mechanical prostheses to live a normal life in the future. To be more realistic, they came here just to see Omo for the last time. Originally, before entering the hospital, Augustus and Raynor had adjusted their mentality, thinking that they must not let Omo be affected by their bad mood. But when the nurse pushed the flatbed cart carrying Omo's body past them, both of them couldn't hold back and burst into tears. A week later, Benjamin and Omo's ashes were sent back to their hometown for burial. The 5th Battalion of the 4th Brigade was transferred from Poker's Pride, and Augustus' squad followed the company on a train to Fort Howe, 1,000 miles away, and entered the fortress on the night of arrival to relieve the garrison's increasing pressure to deal with the increasingly active Kel-morian Sea Dragon Legion nearby. Chapter 46 Titus Finley. Dispatch Hall, Fort Howe, July 16th morning. This day was a good day for Private Titus Finley, because it was the first day he escaped from the hell on earth of our 156 federal prison. Titus was a veteran. He was a staff sergeant, and he was only a few camaraderie heads away from being promoted to sergeant. But because he tried to steal a piece of battlefield captured supplies, Titus was not only demoted to the bottom, but also went to prison. According to the Federal Uniform Military Code of Military Regulations, Part 14, Chapter 76, Article 2, Titus should have been executed immediately, but perhaps the Marine Corps leaders thought that a dead Marine would not be more valuable than a criminal, so he finally survived. During the 3-month forced labor reform, Titus had to work 16 hours a day in a federal mine, using explosives, carts and hose, the most primitive and dangerous methods, and mining ore without protection. Having said that, he finally survived, and was allowed to rejoin the Marine Corps as a private soldier. A transfer order transferred Titus and other soldiers who had returned to the team for various reasons from his original planet Reading III to Turris II, joining the garrison of Fort Howe, a military stronghold of the Federation Marine Corps on the planet. Because it was far from the equator and located in the cold zone, the soldiers on duty outside the dispatch hall of Fort Howe wore grey thick woolen coats, leather earmuffs and long leather boots. The soldiers stationed here were all genuine Marines, and there was no need to wear cool power armor or drive retired Goliath mechas every day to deceive those naked boys who were fascinated by the mechas to join the army. Titus tightened his thin shirt and walked into the dispatch hall where people were everywhere. The temperature in the hall was finally higher, but Titus, who had adapted to the dry and hot climate of Reading III, was still freezing. The cute layer of fat on his belly could not bring any warmth. After being imprisoned, all of Titus' personal belongings and equipment were confiscated. Now he was only wearing a shirt and a thin black nylon jacket. His only possessions were a few pairs of underwear in his handbag and a sonic razor. Now Titus had to walk through the long line of 30 or 40 people in front of him, go to the counter in front of them, and report to the uniformed sergeant. Then, he could receive a thick new set of clothes and new equipment and report to his new superior. Titus walked straight past the long queue, ignoring the surprised eyes of the people next to him, first pushing his belly against the edge of the mahogany table of the counter, and then deftly used his fat butt to push away the soldier who was talking to the dispatch sergeant in front of the counter. He put his elbow on the smooth surface of the counter and pulled out an ID card with identification function from his trouser pocket. "Sergeant, old Titus has some urgent things to do. I think you can open the door." Titus pushed his ID card in front of the sergeant and handed over a cigar that might not be of such good quality. The soldier who was pushed aside could only be angry, but did not dare to say anything. Compared with his thin body, Titus was 6.5 feet tall, which could be regarded as a giant. In comparison, his size was also terrifying, with a thick layer of fat on his solid muscles. When he walked, he was like a clumsy but calm grizzly bear. Titus had dark brown hair shaved into a flat head, and a layer of deep wrinkles accumulated beside his well-defined facial features. When he frowned his thick eyebrows or got angry, the wrinkles opened, making him look even more fierce and terrifying. Private, cutting in line is not something a good federal citizen should do, and as an excellent federal Marine, you should abide by Article 43 of the Marine Regulations. The sergeant was a young man with brown hair and brown eyes. There was a long dark scar on the back of his neck, more precisely, below his left ear. "What's the matter? You are not my mother." Titus didn't know that this meant that the other party was a soldier who had undergone socialization transformation. He knew very little about these reformed soldiers. Instead of wasting time on chattering, you might as well put this pink card away and put it where it belongs. Seeing that the sergeant didn't take his cigar, Titus thought that the other party looked down on the low quality brand he got in prison, but in this case, he didn't have to pay for an extra cigarette. Yes, you are right. To Titus's surprise, the sergeant actually recognized his ridiculous and arrogant logic. "I really shouldn't let the people in the queue behind me wait for a long time. Besides, I'm not your mother, and I have no responsibility to educate you." Although the sergeant's voice was calm and serious when he told the second half of the story, Titus still felt that he was insulting him. But because he didn't want to go to jail again, Titus had to swallow his anger temporarily. He decided to remember the face of the sergeant first and find an opportunity to teach him a lesson when he went to the public bathhouse to take a bath. Private Titus Finley, according to the transfer order, go to the 1st Squad of the 3rd Platoon of the Garrison Company. Your squad leader is, Sergeant Augustus Mengsk, the sergeant said while typing on the keyboard. "It sounds like a good name. I hope you're not a fool." Titus grinned and said, "So, Sergeant, where should I go to get my fluffy bedding, pillow, socks, and a fur coat that won't freeze me to death now?" The sergeant frowned, as if troubled by this problem that went beyond the fixed process. After his eyes swept across the computer screen, his brows relaxed. "You're right, you really should get a set of equipment suitable for severe cold areas. I sincerely apologize to you for my mistake." Titus was speechless for a moment. He had never seen a sergeant sincerely apologize to a private. In the local Marine Corps where bureaucracy and corporal punishment of officers prevailed at Reading 3rd, this usually meant that the other party was going to make things difficult for you. Are all the Tullists so polite? Doesn't this make old Titus seem very uneducated? Go to the number 7 supply station and give it to the person on duty there. Give this to him, and he will give you what you need. The sergeant handed him an extra chip when he returned Titus's ID card to him. "That sounds good." Titus took the ID card and the chip, turned around and left, boarded the bus that was heading deep into the Howe Fortress at the door, and finally stopped in front of a flat single-story building. The number 7 supply station has a silver gray metal shell. There are 2 huge turbo fans on the gleaming metal walls, and a metal pipe that goes straight to the ground is buzzing. The gate of the supply station was unattended, and Titus walked in swaggeringly, thinking that he might find an opportunity to kindly embezzle the supplies here, to help those poor girls who have nothing to wear and are naked. The supply station is very spacious. It is a huge warehouse composed of rows of shelves several people high, and the shelves are full of various cardboard boxes and password boxes. About 7 or 8 young soldiers in brown military uniforms were unloading goods in 2s and 3s, counting the goods, and climbing ladders to move the goods onto or off the shelves. Sitting at the only counter was a soldier who was energetic, but sometimes a little sad. He had short black hair and a neatly groomed uniform. The name on his ID card was James Raynor. "Good morning, what can I do for you?" said Raynor, the acting logistics sergeant. "Thanks to Dazao Shezi Shen, you crossing Shen, Sanyi Liuli, the unkillable little hero, Liu Zio Kingnian, Liu Zitang, Emperor killing demon blade, Shi, Hei Si Fantuan, Shu Yu 201708031646083887, Shu Yu 1. 60,113,080,326,406. The wind blows my face full of sand. Atago's favorite, Jerusalem, and Yizan Heo Shuyu for their monthly tickets, and thanks to the unkillable little hero and Rang Rang special agent for their awards. This is purely hand typed on my phone. Please forgive me if there are any mistakes. Thank you for voting and supporting me. Chapter 47. There is nothing more to say. Do I look well, kid? Ty just handed his ID card and chip to Renault. My equipment was lost when I came here, and they asked me to come here to get some new equipment. Renault took the chip and inserted it into the slot of the scanner. Then, he glanced at Tychus' wrinkled face before looking at the screen. As required, you should get a new ration. Because the latest batch of supply boxes are piled up in the storage unit, we are counting the stored supplies and classifying them. This will take a lot of time. Please return to this counter at 2 p.m. Then, are you sure you are not kidding me? Ty just raised his eyebrows and interrupted Renault. I came all the way from the death desert of Reading 3 to this icy world, wearing only a pair of underwear. In fact, the indoor temperature here has been stably maintained at around 20 degrees Celsius. Renault took out the chip and put it back on the counter. Listen, maybe you didn't understand the meaning of these words, or maybe my words were too polite, so you, a yellow-haired boy, took advantage of me. Ty just put one hand firmly on the counter, leaned forward, and with the other hand, he grabbed Renault's collar, pulled his face towards him, and stared at his dark brown eyes. This trick worked for Tychus every time. He was tall and had a fierce face. Usually, when dealing with those new recruits, as long as he stared into their eyes, those softies would be scared to pee their pants. Tychus could tell at a glance that Renault's service time would definitely not exceed 2 years. Maybe the rank of private first class gave him a lot of points, but based on Renault's physique, he was far from being a match for the veteran Tychus. Maybe you should get my equipment ready with your little followers. I don't have time to stay here and stare at the shelves. Excuse me, I don't understand what you mean. Raynor looked at Tychus calmly, because I don't know if what you spewed out of your mouth was shit. Tychus seemed to be stunned for a moment. He probably didn't expect that Raynor was not afraid at all. If I didn't make it clear enough. This made Tychus embarrassed, so he grabbed Raynor's collar with both hands and lifted him up from the chair with force, determined to teach this new recruit a lesson. Find my equipment immediately, otherwise, I will break every bone in you and twist your head off to use as a urinal. Before that, I will pull the thing on your neck off and kick it like a bull. Raynor has never been a coward in his life. He held Tychus' wrist and pried the hand that was grabbing his collar open little by little with a force that surprised the latter. Tychus realized that he would have to fight today, but it didn't matter. He was usually very measured. He would make Raynor feel humiliated and in agony, and the Marine Corps doctor would not find any wounds or bruises on Raynor's body that could convict him. Today, you will regret angering Tychus Finley. I will break each of your finger bones and glue them together. Tychus was tired of the boring game of threatening each other with the country boy. When a matter developed to the point where no means other than fists could solve it, he had to let the other party know who had the hardest fist. Tychus Finley, who had just been released from prison, had an angry lion in his heart, and put him down, you lunatic. Just as Tychus was about to lift Raynor high above his head and was about to throw him to the storage rack behind the counter like throwing away a piece of garbage, his temple was suddenly pressed against by a cold gun barrel. A somewhat sharp male voice followed in his ears. It sounded like the hooligans and racing gangs he encountered in some colonial towns. They were frivolous and arrogant, and they always thought they were very cool. I'll count to 3. 1, 2. But the slight click of the safety bolt made Tychus retract his contempt and immediately put Renault down, pressing him into the chair like putting a rag doll back into a basket. After straightening his tangled collar, Renault leaned back in the chair and looked at Tychus quietly. Raise your hands and squat against the wall. The voice continued. Tychus turned around and saw a young soldier pointing a shotgun at him. The soldier had messy red hair, some freckles on his nose, and a cigarette that was about to burn out was in his mouth. Didn't you understand? The red-haired soldier spat the cigarette, but in his mouth on the ground, and stomped it out with his foot. Raise your hands and turn your back to me. I hate to see your face. Titus looked at the soldier calmly, unmoved at all, and firmly believed that the other party would never dare to shoot. You'd better put down your gun quickly so that we can finish all the previous things properly. This will be good for both of us before the military police arrive. What's the situation with that person? Hanak. At this time, another person's voice came from the empty hall of the supply station. Titus immediately looked in the direction of the voice and saw a non-commissioned officer in a brown neat military uniform walking towards here with 3 soldiers in the same uniform. Among the 3 people behind, one was chewing gum in his mouth, blowing bubbles out of boredom, with his hands in his trouser pockets. There are thousands of ways to walk, but he chose the most unusual one. This is Josephine. The other person held a pen and a receipt list in his hand and was still writing something while walking. That was Li Pachin Yang. Amy Brandon, holding an E7 Gauss rifle, walked to the right of the sergeant. Her blue eyes were like the sea under the sun. These soldiers all wore flat caps with wolf head badges and their uniforms were covered with dust. They had been moving goods at the other end of the warehouse, while Titus's attention was on Raynor. The sergeant in the lead was a handsome man with cold grey eyes. His originally straight uniform was covered with dust and wrinkles due to the work of moving goods. His face was also stained with black oil, but the rifle badge on his shoulder, which indicated the combat unit, showed that the other side's troops were definitely not rookies who did odd jobs in the army's logistics. The sergeant walked to Titus and Hanak, only one step away from them. Then, he looked at Titus. Tell me, what is this matter? Sir, this matter. The only thing that could make Titus put down his arrogant attitude was the sergeant badge on the sergeant's chest. Look. Augustus turned to Titus and spread his hands. I think there's nothing more to say. Thanks to the unkillable little hero and Agent Rangran for their awards, and to Hope Forever 23,333, San Iliuli, A Dream of 1,000 Years S, Zajuan Q Fatigue, Wugsun, Mingmengda Gugugu, Book Friend 161,121,213,935,249. Command Lsh, Mengsk Rabbit, Book Friend 2019042219170917 Yalxin Wuan, The Unkillable Little Hero, Jinghu Yejing, Dreams, Morning Breeze, Linksio Yunkyo, Yeo Guang Shian Shu, Tinky and Scars, Rice and Stone, Scarlet Knight. Lake Hill, Angel Yunhu, and Zun Sheo for their monthly tickets. Chapter 48 It's all misunderstanding. Hanak, Amy, send this guy to the military police department. Augustus waved his hand, and the soldiers holding Gauss rifles behind him immediately stepped forward. Augustus recognized Titus, the famous fuckman in the game, but he didn't want to have anything to do with him. If possible, he'd better get out of here as far as possible. The only true friend of a selfish villain like Titus Finley is Jim Raynor. People like him would never make sacrifices for others in their lives. I believe this is just a trivial misunderstanding, sir. Titus' voice is always deep and powerful. Just now, I just wanted to help him tie a bow tie. Maybe my attitude is not so good, but it's not that I have to go to the military police for coffee just because I hurt him, right? Amy, put on the bayonet, Augustus said. While Titus was still arguing with Augustus, Raynor turned his eyes back to the computer screen in front of him. In the past, Raynor was too lazy to look at the identity information of those who came to collect supplies, but today he had to take a look. Today, the feud was settled. Raynor had no intention of taking revenge on Titus, but he had to be careful that the other party would bear a grudge. The next moment, Raynor's eyes widened. Augustus, which company is the garrison? There is only one company left in this fortress now. Which garrison company do you think it will be? Augustus put his hands on his waist and looked at Raynor. Originally, the 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Marine Corps and the 4th Brigade of the 33rd Ground Assault Division were stationed in the Hau Fortress, including the 5th Battalion, but the Kel-morian army in this area suddenly attacked several cities around the fortress last week. The troops in the fortress were all withdrawn to provide support, leaving only the Warfield Company, which had to be reorganized due to severe casualties. Holy shit, this villain is the criminal who is coming to our class. Raynor cursed. Damn it, are you serious? Hanek exclaimed, poking Titus with his shotgun, immediately causing the latter to glare. Why do we have to accept a labor camp prisoner? I remember telling that guy Warfield that the boss wants an intellectual beauty with a perky butt. Augustus didn't say that. Amy next to him put down the rifle and shook her head helplessly. Forget it. Anyway, except for being a man, everything else is not bad. Hanek shrugged. It seems that you are the class I want to join. But Titus quickly put aside Hanek's little provocation. He was unlucky enough and lucky enough, because at least it meant that he didn't have to go to the military police. Like I said before, it's just a small misunderstanding. I just had a little conflict with that black-haired kid in the Marine Corps. It's nothing. Nothing that can't be solved by a cigar and number 8 whiskey. Jim, I don't know the name of this villain yet. Augustus' mouth twitched twice. Then he took off his hat, pushed Hanek away, and stood in front of Titus. Titus was half an inch taller than Augustus, but he soon found that this did not add any momentum to him. Augustus stood straight in front of the giant man, and the distance between the two was perhaps no more than an inch. The pair of cold grey eyes were staring at him, cold, majestic, and ready to go, which reminded Titus of the gliding giant eagle hovering over the town in his hometown. His name is Titus Finley, Raynor said. Mr. Finley, this matter ends here. As the squad leader of this squad, I hope you can reconcile with Jim. Augustus stared into Titus' eyes and said, but don't think I'm a magnanimous person. I know you're a complete villain and a selfish scum. You don't have honor and collective in your heart. You only want to make money in the army. Maybe the only thing you care about in your life is the number in your bank account. He said, I won't allow you to spoil the whole pot of porridge. Whether I can see it or not, you have to keep your tail between your legs. Otherwise, I'll let you go. Do you understand? I understand. Titus could roughly see the character of this sergeant. The other party was definitely not a weak person who could be bullied. He was young and capable, and he couldn't tolerate a grain of sand in his eyes. He was definitely not comparable to the old sergeants on Reading 3 who suffered from senile dementia because they stayed in the rear for many years and did nothing. It was very difficult to fool Augustus. In Titus's impression, this kind of young sergeants are often very enterprising. They care more about their own promotion than money and women. Although Titus didn't understand why Augustus knew so much about him the first time they met, it didn't really matter. None of these things bothered Titus the most. Augustus's definition of making money didn't seem very friendly to him, and if he was an honest and upright person who abided by the rules and regulations of the Marine Corps, that was too damn bad. This kind of NCO was a model of loyalty and excellence to both the Marine Corps and his subordinates, but Titus was not very happy to be under such a person. Contrary to what Augustus said, Titus was a selfless and kind-hearted man, a loyal Federation soldier, and his ideals and ambitions were noble and sacred to the point of being unspeakable. Titus was engaged in an extremely great cause, that is, robbing the rich to help the poor, robbing the wealth of the federal government and the Marine Corps, to help the poor of him, the poorest man in the galaxy. Nothing else made Titus' heavy heart beat more than money, getting more money, and hearing the clinking of money bags. To this end, he had stolen federal supplies more than once, and sold truckloads of weapons and armor in the seized material warehouse to pirates, interstellar armed forces, and even the Kel-morians, by colluding with logistics officers, and then destroyed the records of the seizure. If no one knew that a certain unit had seized a batch of supplies, it certainly did not exist. And if all of this was exposed, Titus would be shot 100 times. Apart from that, Titus did not do anything out of line. He never hurt civilians, because they really didn't have much money. He loved beautiful women, but he never hooked up with decent women. He only spent money in legal bars and practitioners. Now, Titus's great cause is facing severe challenges. Titus is just a private, a sole soldier. If his new squad leader is the same as him, it will be easy. Although there will be more people to share the money, he will have a protective umbrella. As long as the war continues, Titus will always find a way to make a fortune. Years of operation have given Titus a huge network of intelligence and customer relationships. As long as there are goods, he can sell them at a good price. No matter where they come from, there will always be people who dare to buy them. I will never treat you unfairly under my command. After the shock and knock, Augustus' tone softened a lot, but he still didn't give Titus a good look. You are a big guy, and you are just right for this place. Follow me to move the goods. Then, go find your own equipment. There are no spoiled young men and young ladies here. We are a whole, and no one is special. Hanak, pick up your cigarette butts and mop this floor. There are enough assholes in this class, so don't cause me any trouble. Oh, what does it matter? I'll go right away, little Amy. Huh? Why are you pulling me? Everyone who sees it gets a share. Today is Children's Day. Let us wish Archbishop Artenis of Durham a happy holiday and assemble the troops with one click. If the Shadow Guard is knocking on your door, here are the gifts you'll receive. The Dark Master's Master Blade, Raynor's Star Crusher, and a one-way ticket to a day trip to the teleporter. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49, Sea Dragon Legion. July 18th. Heavy snow fell from early morning to dusk. The road leading to the landing platform in the Howe Fortress was piled with 8 inches of snow. Augustus, wearing thick winter clothes, drove a snowplow to clear the road. In the light of the headlights, the fluttering snowflakes were dim. At this time, the snow was getting smaller and smaller, and there were only a few snowplows driven by soldiers in Augustus's squad on the road. The street lights on both sides of the road had been lit, and the pure white world was flashing with dazzling snow-colored light. Augustus's snowplow was driving slowly on the road. In the cockpit, a high-precision wooden retro phonograph that had just been sent from Korhal IV stealing last week was playing blue music, and there was a cup of steaming coffee next to the dashboard. Today was another ordinary day. I worked hard in the fortress and slacked off appropriately, but there was no war filled with gunpowder, no need to kill people, and no comrades would die around me. Augustus thought. Praise peace. Thinking of this, Augustus picked up the coffee and took a sip. His whole body immediately felt warm. The caffeine made him energetic. Suddenly, something caught Augustus's eyes. In front of his left were 2 snowplows driving fast. In the front one, 2 red-haired and blonde boys were sitting on the front and the front passenger seats, respectively. Even though it was still snowing, their car windows were still open, and the loud rock music was blowing Augustus' eardrums. Hanak and Josephine are 2 bad boys. They are noisy, but girls like them. They sang loudly while laughing. Just as Augustus was about to turn on the radio speaker to scold them, Hanak drove the snowplow past him. A snow thrower with an opening to the left threw all the broken snow blocks onto Augustus' car window. Augustus' good mood dropped a little. Speed up. Woohoo. That was Renault's voice. I'm the man chasing the wind. Within a few seconds, another larger snowplow drove past him, throwing more snow onto Augustus's car window, forcing him to turn on the windshield wipers. The coffee in his hand spilled onto his white windbreaker, and Augustus's anger was soaring. Hey, little wolf cub of the Mengsk family, can you give me a ride? Augustus opened the car window and looked in the direction of the voice. 100 yards in front of his car, a man wearing a silver grey windbreaker and a long-brimmed hood was waving at him. Augustus drove the car slowly over, stopped it, and opened the right door. Captain, I heard you are going to be promoted? The commander of the 1st Company, Warfield, climbed up the ladder step by step to the cab and sat down, leaning comfortably on the co-pilot's seat. It's almost there. Do you have coffee, kid? There is instant coffee, but you have to make it yourself. Augustus turned the steering wheel and prepared to turn. Where are you going? I just want to drive back. The command center of Fort Howe. You know, I just took a plane to Oak Forest to give a report, and before I could even stand still, that chameleon Vanderspoe was anxious for me to meet him. Warfield was rummaging through a storage box behind the seat for a cup and a kettle. We are not under his control. Augustus' car turned a corner and drove in the direction he came from. Lieutenant Colonel Javier Vanderspoe was the acting lieutenant colonel of Fort Howe. Originally, all the soldiers and personnel of the fort, including the 4th Battalion of the 2nd Marines, were under his command. But as Augustus said, Warfield's company should not be under his command. I agree with you completely. Warfield laughed and focused on how to make coffee in a moving snowplow. But as I told you last time, Van der Spur always wants to step on our heads and pee. I don't like that hypocritical guy. He has been staying in the impregnable fortress for many years. He has never fought a few tough battles, but he always puts on airs and uses his military rank to bully others. Yesterday, he went to the headquarters of the 4th Brigade set up at Hobo Pass and said that the internal defense of Fort Howe was empty. Therefore, while the 1st Company was stationed in the fortress, this company must be temporarily assigned to him for command. Warfield said. He asked me to come over, and he must have shown off this to me. I don't need to guess what the result will be. Augustus chuckled. In short, we are in big trouble. Warfield snorted. Just wait and see. When I stand in front of Van der Spur, that monkey will definitely jump on our faces and jump around. You just said he was a chameleon. Augustus said. That is a monkey that can change color. Warfield took a sip of hot coffee. I never give people nicknames, but Van der Spur is an exception. We all know that even among the Federal Marines, there are many soldiers who have been corrupted by money and power. There are countless scums who have enriched themselves and played power games. He continued, these people are hiding in the rear, and it is much more difficult to get promoted than on the front line, so they soon shift their attention to other aspects, for example, how to use the power at hand to make themselves live better and more comfortable. Van der Spur has always hidden it well, but I guarantee that his assets are far more than the salary he deserves. The acting lieutenant colonel of Fort Howe is a lucrative job. We can just treat him as a clown in the circus. Augustus said with a smile. I feel much better when I think about it this way. Warfield nodded. Then he looked at his watch. Haha, we have to hurry up. Clown Fan asked me to reach the command center within 10 minutes. Augustus's snowplow gradually accelerated and soon caught up with Harnack, Renault and others in front and threw snow on their faces at a faster speed. Harnack and Josephine, who had the windows open, were directly soaked, and their happy singing stopped abruptly. The snowplow sped all the way and finally stopped steadily at the door of the only command center in Fort Howe. Warfield and Augustus got out of the car together. Standing at the door were 2 resocialized soldiers, who immediately stood still and saluted when they saw the 2 of them. All of Van der Spur's men are resocialized soldiers. I think he doesn't like soldiers with ideas. He only wants robots that obey orders. Warfield said to Augustus when he walked into the command center. Don't stand there. Come in with me. The command center during the Kalian War was a large multi-story building. Augustus and Warfield had to take an elevator to the observation platform on the upper floors of the command center with huge glass on all 4 sides, and walk through the corridor with oil paintings to the office of Lieutenant Colonel Van der Spur. The door of the office was tightly closed, which meant that, even if Warfield was very reluctant, he had to knock on the door and get permission from the owner of the office before entering. It was the first time that Augustus met Van der Spur. After listening to Warfield's description, he originally thought that this was a middle-aged man who had been in the office for many years. But the first impression of Van der Spur was that he was a handsome man. He had a clean and tidy uniform and a brand new long-brimmed military cap. The precipitation of time on his face made him more charming and mature. Please forgive me, as the commander of that place, I have to travel back and forth between Hobo Pass and Fortress Howe almost every day, commanding the frontline troops, to drive the Kel-morians back and forth like driving rabbits. As he was speaking, Van der Spur's face suddenly changed. What are you laughing at? Nothing, Lieutenant Colonel. We suddenly remembered something funny. Augustus said expressionlessly. Van der Spur glanced at Augustus and said, Captain Warfield, I need you to send a troop to Wetberg to scout the enemy. The scouts of the Zulu outpost and the fortress reconnaissance aircraft have discovered a small detachment of the Sea Dragon Legion in that area. Now, how many people are there? I can only send 1 more platoon at most. Warfield immediately became serious. If the enemy attacks the fortress at this time, you can't let a group of engineers and mechanics carry guns to fight. Right now, 1 platoon is enough. The Sea Dragon Legion is just a mob of beggars and robbers. But please send the most elite troops, because the area is not under our control at present. Wetberg is a mixed bag, and your men must be careful. Van der Spur's face was full of a confident smile. No one knows the Kel-morian bastards better than me. They are just a group of cowardly rats. Even if there are only women and children left in the How fortress, the Kel-morian people will run away as soon as they see the machine guns on the fortress parapet. Chapter 50, Umoyang Mercenary Graven Hill. Chapter 50 Umoyang Mercenary Graven Hill. That castle is a city in the Terran Federation about 50 miles away from the How fortress. There is a highway that has not been maintained for many years and leads directly to the city center that has been razed to the ground. After the armored personnel carrier in the third row, where Augustus was riding, set off from the How fortress, the convoy had been driving in the cold night of Augustus II for nearly an hour. Because many sections of the road had been blown up, they did not have a smooth journey. The area where the city is located is close to the frigid zone. At this time of year in the northern hemisphere, the lowest temperature has dropped to below -10 degrees Celsius. The cold wind blew from the south, the only ocean on Augustus, which was gradually freezing, and the thick waterproof curtain behind the truck bed whistled. I want to know why we have to go to this faraway place at this point to scout the Kel-morians who are nowhere to be found. Harnack complained in the troop transport assigned to Augustus's squad, and there are plenty of transport planes on the helipad in the fortress. Why do we have to take a car? Maybe they are afraid that we will be shot down by the local small pistols with an effective range of only a few dozen yards. Renault said, Van der Spoel has always been considerate. He is a gentleman and a good man. I say, it is important to finish work early and go back to bed. Titus's power armor is larger than the average model. Or, let's go to the local bar to have some fun. Great. Harnack shouted. Alright, alright. Augustus glared at Harnack. Do you know where that is? And if there are really Kel-morians, I will not sacrifice a few lives to save you when you are drunk. The shining eyes of Harnack, Josephine and Titus immediately dimmed at an alarming speed. As they were talking, the convoy drove into the bumpy and crated road of Wetberg after a bumpy ride, heading all the way to the city, and finally stopped at an intersection with a traffic light. Augustus closed his helmet visor, was the first to open the curtain of the armored personnel carrier, and jumped out of the vehicle with a Gauss rifle, decorated with a grey wolf head emblem on the handle. The other Marines jumped out one after another. The snowflakes that fell on Augustus's visor melted and condensed into ice immediately. He looked at the few places where there were still lights, and what he saw was a rolling black shadow, as if it was a hill close together. But Augustus soon discovered that the truth was far from that. This was actually the ruins of a city, with collapsed high-rise buildings, rubble and car wreckage everywhere, and the snow swallowed everything, making the bright lights and the vibrant hustle and bustle all silent, leaving only a white wasteland. Wetberg was once a city with a population of 200,000. During the years of the Kel-morian War, it had been lucky enough to escape the flames of war many times. But a few months ago, Wetberg suffered the same fate as Pox Pride. The Kel-morian Sea Dragon Legion invaded, plundered, and destroyed the city. So, where are we going to capture the little Ibab of the Kel-morian? Titus said in a muffled voice. There is no plan and the intelligence is pitifully little. Don't you think something is wrong? What kind of enemy requires us to come here to investigate so late at night? The Kel-morian are not blind. Don't they know to run away when they hear the sound of a car? That lieutenant colonel is really a naive guy. I really doubt how he got this position. Captain Warfield means that we have to come at least once. Augustus said, after all, there are still thousands of people living in this ruin. They are refugees who are unwilling to leave their homes. We should at least ensure their safety. Oh, this doesn't sound like the style of our Marines. Titus laughed. Do you know how the Marines on the Reading 3 protect his people? Kill them all, and say it was the Kel-morians who did it. That way, the Un-Universe News Network's war correspondents can write a picture-based article criticizing the Kel-morians' viciousness and arouse the hatred of the residents of the core worlds towards the enemy. Then, the federal government can issue public debt in the name of war, he said. As for who will pay the public debt in the end, it will of course be the defeated Kel-morians. Titus, I hope you can understand this. Although we are not angels, we should not be demons either. Augustus said as he led his squad to the few light sources in Fort Wetter. Reagan, the platoon leader of the 3rd platoon, ordered his squad to investigate one of them. Augustus walked along an obviously cleared path and past a church with only 3 walls left. The broken stained glass windows reflected colorful light under the light of the armored searchlight. A huge cross fell from the top of the church and was inserted diagonally into the snow, as if it was standing on a huge tomb. According to the orders of the Governor's Office of Telesis II and the 1st Main Continent Command of the Northern Hemisphere, all cities and towns in this area should strictly implement lights out and curfews, but the residents of Wetterberg obviously don't care about this regulation. Wetterberg has become a ruin, but most of the residential buildings can still use solar panels for power supply. Electricity is not the most scarce resource in this era. However, this ruin is actually a chaotic land of death. Since it is already considered an area that neither the Terran Federation nor the Kel-morian Federation wants to govern, there are all kinds of people hiding here. Homeless locals, wanted desperados, space pirates and mercenaries who repair here and trade with locals for supplies and fuel. Moreover, in the dead of winter, hungry wild beasts in the local area will also attack humans in the dark. You must be careful of wild beasts or even your neighbors climbing up your walls for a little food. Only a few buildings have lights that are on all night. Usually the lairs of the largest local gangs or bars open to space pirates and mercenaries. Augustus' destination was a small bar with a small area. There were several sentries outside the bar, but no one dared to shoot at the Federation Marines in power armor, and they didn't even say a proper question. For the locals who had suffered a lot, the Federation and the Kel-morian armies were no different. After observing for a while, Augustus led a few soldiers into the bar, leaving the others to set up sentries. The bar was unexpectedly clean and tidy, with the pleasant smell of incense mixed with the dry and cold air outside the door. The floor was a repaired wooden floor, with more than a dozen tables and matching chairs. There were only 4 or 5 people sitting inside. I think the others had already run away when they heard that the Federation Marines were coming. Augustus walked straight to the bar owner behind the counter, and the wooden boards creaked under his power boots. I want to buy a piece of intelligence about the Kel-morian. Augustus threw a thick stack of bills on the counter. Sergeant Mengsk is so rich. Titus asked in surprise on the communication channel, and accurately estimated a considerable amount of money by the thickness of the banknotes. Of course. Raynor said proudly, Augustus may be the richest man on this planet. What does it have to do with you? Why are you showing off? Titus said this, but he wanted to find out the details of Augustus. If Augustus is really a big shot, then Titus doesn't mind currying favor with him. Sir, I don't know anything. The bar owner was a middle-aged man who had lost one hand. He was indeed frightened by the thickness of the banknotes at first, but after thinking about it, he thought his life was more important. You are afraid of revenge, right? Augustus asked. Come on, this guy definitely doesn't know as much as I do. At this time, a man with strange clothes came up to Augustus, leaned on the table, and took away all the banknotes on it, and then excitedly counted the banknotes with a companion next to him. Augustus turned his head to look at him. The man was dressed like the locals, wearing a thick woolen military coat, dark brown thick velvet military boots, and a furry 3-ear earmuff hat. The hem of this dark brown coat was very long, extending all the way to above the ankles. If all this was normal, then it was strange that he was wearing sunglasses in the middle of the night. Judging from the man's face and his youthful voice, he should be in his 20s. It really makes me cry to see you. You may not know that Remy and I are starting a business. After counting, the man looked at Augustus and shook hands with him enthusiastically regardless of the height difference between him and the Marine. Oh, my name is Gravenhill. I'm from Kel-morian, and I'm a mercenary. This is my business card with my email address on it. Is that so? Then why do you think your information is worth this price? Augustus took the business card and put it away. Behind the mask that Hill couldn't see, he smiled. Gravenhill is the mercenary leader on the Hyperion in the game, the guy who sells mercenary contracts to Raynor. It's definitely worth the price, sir. A Kel-morian Sea Dragon assault team is preparing to raid the How Fortress tonight, Hill said. How do you know this? Augustus's face changed. I'm a mercenary. I used to take jobs from the Kel-morians. Some of the mercenaries who did dirty work for the Kel-morians through my hands are still among them, so there is no shortage of intelligence. Hill said, of course, I have signed mercenary contracts with both the Federation and the Kel-morians, and there are quite a few. The Kel-morians are under great military pressure now. Alas, it is actually difficult for us to deal with it. The demand is greater than the supply. The commission must increase, but they can't pay it, and they all owe it. Perhaps because of his youth, Hill was much more talkative at this time. Mercenaries also need to eat. They have parents and children to support. Many people can't even afford to eat at home. So, this really can't be blamed on me. I don't really want to sell them out. Jim, hurry up. Let's go find Reagan. He is the only one who has the equipment to contact Warfield directly. Augustus turned and left. Well, do you trust me so much? Hill was also stunned. No matter what, we have to confirm it. Augustus left a few words and walked out of the bar with the confused Renault and others. We will contact each other later. If this news is true, I will pay you double the money just now. I will contact you. This is a potential customer with money. Hill's companion Remy said, we should keep in touch with him. Please vote. Thanks to book friends 201708031646083887. Twilight Apostle, his angel of death, Agent Rangrong, Nerazim's little probe little tiger fang, just like Hemorrhoids, by a real, I'm a mythical pig riding charge, book friends. 150,607,172,944,595, elite human soldiers, Kang, Ming, Lakil, Kim Guanshan, Os, starring 1. Hope Forever 23,333, San Iliuli, A Dream of 1,000 Years S's monthly tickets, thanks to GR 521. Command like, Twilight Apostle, Agent Rangrong for the rewards. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.